All right, welcome everyone. I'm going to call to order the February 18, 2025 meeting of the Lakeville School Board. If everyone will stand up with me to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we're going to jump in with the roll call of the board members. If you'll start from my right.
Amber Cameron.
Brett Nicholson.
Paul Carbone.
I'm Matt Swanson.
Michael Bauman.
Kim Baker.
Carly Anderson.
All right, and if the executive cabinet would introduce themselves as well.
Emily McDonald. Brenda Albrecht.
Bill Holmgren.
Michelle Humphrey.
All right, and our guests from Teaching and Learning.
Elida Kane, Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning.
Sandy Georgie, Director of Elementary Teaching and Learning.
Nicole Adams, Director of Integrated Continuous Improvement.
And Kim Elson, Assistant to the Superintendent.
All right. Mr. Superintendent, I'll turn it over to you for the good news.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good news. First, start off with Lakeville North Junior to represent Team USA in international figure skating competitions. So Lakeville North High School Junior Sophie Chausch, I think I pronounced that right, is turning heads in the figure skating world as a member of the Northernets Synchronized Skating Junior team. Sophie and her team are representing Team USA on the international stage, competing against elite teams around the world. Most recently, Sophie traveled to Austria for the Mozart Cup on January 17th and 18, where the Northernets placed 5th out of 18 teams. Next, they head to Poland to compete in the Hevelius Cup February 14th and 15th. So that means 3 days ago they were doing their thing over there in Poland. Congratulations. Lakeville South earned starred performance at the Minnesota State High School League One-Act Play State Festival. Lakeville South High School's theater program once again made history at the 2025 Minnesota High School League One-Act Play State Festival, earning a starred performance rating for its production of Henry V, directed by Cody Carlson and Maddie Market Mateffi. Along with its starred performance recognition, Lakeville South was also named the 2025 Section 1AA champion and a recipient of the True Stone Spotlight on the Arts Award. Congratulations to the students and production team on this incredible achievement. Outstanding. You can applaud if you want to do that. Lakeville students take charge at Youth in Governance Conference. Last month, 44 students from the Lakeville Youth in Government delegation made their mark at the State Youth in Government Conference, a civic engagement program where 1,400 students from across the state of Minnesota come together to participate in model state government. In the judicial branch, Lakeville North senior Ellie Ars led the Supreme Court as Chief Justice and was honored with the Servant Leadership Award. In the legislative sphere, Lakeville South Junior Maya Wright's National Issues Forum proposal was one of only 12 to pass out of 170 proposals. Additionally, Century Middle School 8th grader Ansh Bhatia was recognized as an outstanding delegate, and Lakeville North Junior Saja Saad's media article landed on the front page of the student newspaper. So congratulations to Lakeville Youth in Government delegation on their achievements. Go Lakeville. 700 wins for Lakeville North coach John Oxton. On Friday, January 31st, Lakeville North High School head boys basketball coach John Oxton won his 700th career game in a 74-58 victory over our neighbors at Farmington Tigers. He's one of just 6 coaches in the 109 years of Minnesota boys basketball coach to reach this milestone. Since taking the helm in 1990, Coach Oxton has led Lakeville North and Lakeville South High School to 12 section championships and a 2014 state title. Congratulations, Coach John Oxton. Yeah. All right. I'm going to transition into another opportunity here to celebrate one of Lakeville's staff members. And I want to introduce you to Lake Marion Elementary STEM specialist, Kim Menard. Kim, can you come on up? I just want to say a few words, if that's okay. First of all, I want to say that I'm very pleased to have a special guest with us to share in good news, Ms. Menard. She has taught at Lake Marion Elementary for the past 11 years and was part of the founding team of elementary STEM specialists here at Lakeville area schools nearly a decade ago. Recently, Ms. Menard was awarded the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. Let's applaud that. This is the highest award that science and math teachers can receive, and candidates for this award go through an extensive and rigorous vetting process. We are extremely proud of her, and I asked Ms. Menard to come speak to you all this evening, briefly, about elementary STEM programming in Lakeville area schools. It's my honor to introduce again our STEM specialist from Lake Marion Elementary, Kim Menard.
Thank you.
Ma'am, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, greetings to the board and everybody else who's gathered here. Thanks for inviting me to celebrate good news happening at Lakeville area schools. Now, one of the teaching methods that you'll see in science classrooms today is phenomena-based instruction, where you start with a phenomena, something kids can observe, something they can ask questions about. Thank you for teaching us about that, Sandy Georgie. And then how you can use as the basis for investigation in your units. So before we talk about PAMES, let's begin with a shared phenomenon, and I need to bring my assistant up here to help. It's Isaac. For the board members, they've noticed when they sat down, it doesn't look quite like usual. There's some stuff in front of them, so we're going to be using that for our shared phenomenon today. I will guide you through it, and then I have some helpers that are going to come clear things up as we use them, because when you work in an elementary classroom, you know that is a very good practice. So, first of all, you're going to have a pie tin. I'm going to have you pull that in front of you. And then you're going to have some milk. We're going to pour that milk right on into that pie tin. As you do that, our milk clearing helpers are going to come. They're going to get rid of the milk that you have, or the pictures that you have. And then you have some food coloring. We're going to take, you can pick one color to start with, and we're going to put 4 drops toward the center. Squeeze some of those in. 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll cap them up, and then you'll get to add the other colors. We're going to kind of make a little square, so we'll put them next to it, and it's okay if it overlaps a little bit. We'll add all of our colors there. Okay, milk collectors, go collect our milk pitchers. We can't trust them up there with them. And then they'll come and get you can have one go one way, one go the other. Yep, you can take ours too. Here they come. Next, what we're going to be doing, once you get your colors all sorted, you can put those back in their little container. And you're going to see some dish soap, and you're going to have a little Q-tip. We're going to swirl that around in there. Looks like some people are still getting their colors just right. Beautiful, beautiful. This Cameron's ready to go. And I'll show you what we're going to do with this. We'll do a little test first. Oh, still getting our colors. Beautiful. Fantastic. Okay, ready? You're going to swirl your Q-tip in there, and then we're going to do a little practice. What we're going to do in a moment, but not yet, is touch that right to the center of all of our colors, and we're going to be holding that down for 3 seconds. So it's going to go like this. You're going to put it to the bottom of your pie tin, and you're going to twist. 1, 2, 3, and then you're going to lift it up. So let's do a practice first. 1, 2, 3, twisting a little bit, and you'll just lift it up. All right, Isaac, give it a go. Did you want me to? Okay, here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3, with some little twists, and we'll lift it up. Now, as you're doing this, what are you observing? What are you seeing happening? Shout it out into your microphones. What do you see? Colors, kaleidoscope. What I hear over here? Swirling. And sometimes it really gets swirling and keeps moving. Anyone else?
So the colors are moving away from where I had stuck the Q-tip.
Yeah, colors are moving away. Really cool things. You can sit down. Thanks for helping. Our collectors can come and grab our colors and our soap. Now, if this was STEM class, what we do is probably use this to teach the scientific method. We would document what happened. We would change one variable. We'd test it again, and then see what we could learn from the data that we had. But for today, for us, let us be more of a metaphor for STEM. In our STEM class, in our district, we have our 9 pie tins around the room, and we have our 9 buildings that have been provided by the community with our nice walls. And then we've had a chance to have that filled up with all the things that we need to teach. Then we get to add our kids, the colors. And the different colors are cool because our kids have different skills, they have different talents, they have different backgrounds and cultures, even different languages. And just looking at it just like that is kind of an interesting picture. But we like to then add the teacher. And we like to take that teacher and we like to swirl the teacher in professional learning communities, our PLCs. We like to get our professional development that's inside the school and out of the school. We have our community partnerships, and we like to just immerse ourselves in that, and then we want to be the ones to bring the magic. We want to see kids have a dynamic experience where they get to make connections with the content and with each other. Now, after moving back to Minnesota 16 years ago, I had a chance to sub for a while, and then I got to fill a last-minute opening in gifted education. And hot topic right then was STEM. And they started putting STEM into the different Discover curriculum that we had. And it was cool to be a part of that. Some of my best science memories are for working with those Discover kids. But it was just a teeny little dish. The next year that I was here, they added STEM, and I got to be, as you said, part of the founding STEM team, STEAM team as it was then. And we got to see not just that little dish, but we got to see these tins all around. So every single kid, wherever they are in Lakeville, not just the ones that could be in a special club or have a PTO that can raise a lot of money, but every kid in Lakeville area schools gets to have coding and robotics and Star Lab. They get to have the messy science standards that we like to take in the STEM room, where you have your engineering and all of your things. And our community partnerships, every single building gets to have that. And we are so excited. This program has continued to grow, and it's going to keep emerging. Thanks for collecting our mess over there. And each school, besides that they have that shared part, they each have their own nuance. Just like, because each teacher get to immerse themselves and gets to absorb different things. The PAMES program gets to celebrate some of the things that I get a chance to do. Because I've had a chance to do training with Jeffers Institute and with Hamlin and St. Thomas and with Kidwind. So for me, I get excited about teaching the standards using solar energy, or some of the team teaching with Mother Nature pieces. We've seen that go beyond our classroom into kids who want to come to the school board and try to get the message across that solar could be good for our school. It could be saving us money, be a teaching tool, and it could be good for the planet. We've had a chance at our school to go beyond and do some tree planting with Tree Trust, and right now we are working on getting 1,000 pounds of plastic. Please send it in, everyone. We want 1,000 pounds, keeping out of the landfill, and we're going to be earning a bench for our school while bringing awareness and asking ourselves, what is our next step with that? So there's a woman named Wangari Maathai. She is a Nobel Peace Prize winner from Kenya, and she tells a story that has really touched me. And it's about a forest fire. This forest fire is burning, and the animals are standing around, unable to move. They are petrified. When a little hummingbird comes by, looks at the fire, goes to the nearest river, gets a beak full of water, and spits it on the fire. Over and over, the hummingbird is going back and doing this while the animals are saying, "What are you doing? You are so little. Your beak is so small." And the hummingbird just says, "I'm doing the best that I can." My invitation asked me to share what I am proud of with STEM. Well, I'm not the biggest and I'm not the best, but I am proud to add my little drop to the Lakeville community to try to make a difference in the world. I'm proud of my very shy Discover student who stood before a different board and brought herself up to her big height to say, "I really believe that solar is right for our school, that it can help the planet, it can help our district, that it can bring teaching opportunities." I'm wearing the shirt that she sent me that she designed as part of other work she was doing outside of high school. And it came in the perfect day when I was working on finalist stuff for the PAMES program, and I was thinking about bowing out because of all the things I was not. This is the same student that went on to do a podcast. And her first podcast, she credited the STEM program and Discover, was showing her that she had voice and could bring change. And I'm proud of the first field trip I organized for my kids at Lake Marion to go to see the AP Chem demo show, because some of them don't have rides to get there. And the next morning, one of my students came up, she grabbed my arm, one of my English language learners, and she said, there were kids up there who looked like me. Does that mean that I can do that too? Yes, it does. I'm proud of the kids that have a hard time outside of school, so they've fallen behind in some of their skills. But that little guy, he might not know how to make friends, he might have trouble reading, but he's the one that's helping his friends light their light bulbs. Or the little girl that just struggled, but she could reach into a garbage can and she could take out something someone else threw away and make something beautiful, and something I will never throw away. I'm proud of all these kids and who they represent, and being a small part of what goes into them, because they are going to go out and change the world. Teaching STEM is terrifying, and it is exhausting, and it is colorful, and it is swirling, and it is unpredictable, and it is wonderful. And I live in the gratitude that I have the health and the opportunity to take what has been poured into me and take my little drop and put that back into Lakeville. Thanks for having me, and thanks for having STEM.
Can we give it up one more time?
Chair, I just want to say thank you for coming and sharing that with us. I believe it's one of the things that makes Lakeville great is the wonderful educators that we have and the students that we have too. So it was really nice to hear you talk about what you're doing in the classroom and share the love of learning that you're teaching your students for. It just really made my day. So thanks for sharing.
Thank you for being creative and playing along with us.
I think that gave us a little insight into why you won the presidential award, and just congratulations once again, just amazing. I'm not sure how we follow that one, but I guess we'll keep going. Approval of the agenda. If there are no requests for additions to the agenda,
I'd like to make a motion.
All right. Director Cameron?
Normally we first and second, though, so I wanted to wait until, or is it okay to go?
A motion to approve the agenda?
No,
Or
a motion to amend.
Sure.
No? You want me to go now?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I'd like to make a motion to move public comment to the beginning of our meeting. I feel like last week we had a number of parents in our audience, one of which was drawn to speak and wasn't able to do that because they had to go home because of their kid. I think our board wants to hear from parents, especially stakeholders, students, and having this be the most accessible place on our agenda, I think, is important. I looked at other districts, our peers in the South Suburban Conference, Wayzata, Edina, all the names we've been throwing out. If they have public comment as part of their agenda, which all don't, it's at the beginning of the meeting. Our city council has it at the beginning of the meeting. And so I think to be fair to stakeholders and to not make them sit through hours and hours of meeting, I would like to make a motion to move public comment until right after our agenda approval.
We can discuss the. We'll get into discussion. Is there a second?
I will second.
All right. Is there any discussion on the motion? There being first, just for the minutes, it was seconded by Director Anderson. Any discussion on the motion?
Can I say one other thing, actually? Brett and I have been attending the MSBA trainings, and I think something, not for this agenda necessarily, but I think for next agenda it'd be helpful to put a discussion of public comment on our agenda. We learned through the one training we've been to thus far that public comment should be a discussion amongst the board on how we want as a board to operate with public comment. It's not a decision made by the chair. We don't have a policy 206, which would govern how public comment works. And so in lieu of that, it was stated that public comment should be discussed and decided by the board.
Director Nicholson.
So just thinking back to talking with a couple of the people from the previous board and why public comment really hasn't been around since, 2022, I think. I think when they, asking a few people why public comment went away, there was discussion around, well, everybody kind of got up It, in their words, it kind of became a circus and a show, and then people left. So I think you're going to have to weigh both options. But if we're moving, are we moving to 6 o'clock?
We are. All of
For all
our
the
standard
meetings
meetings
here,
will be
so-
at 6 o'clock, starting at
Okay.
6 o'clock
So-
now.
Correction on that, we have had public comment the last 2 years. We've just done it prior to the start of the meeting. So when we did it, it wasn't televised as part of the meeting. It was before we actually started the meeting.
So it wasn't.
So is
wasn't
there
part
any
of the meeting,
record?
no.
It wasn't
Yeah.
part of the meeting, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I will add, we still do have the stakeholder session once a month. I mean, if people want to come earlier and talk. I do think that it may be a misuse of your motion might not be proper. Approval of the agenda, I think, is more so if you want to add something to the agenda, not to rearrange the agenda item, which under our policy, is actually the purview of the board, is structuring the agenda. I'm not opposed to the discussion, obviously, and if the board wants to move it, I'm not opposed to that. But again, I do get concerned. We have, staff that wait here for the meeting to do their presentations as well and provide us information. So I'd like to get them in and out if they want. I do also think there's a value for the members of the community to actually listen to what they have to say. But yeah, Director Carbone, do you have a comment?
No, I was just going to mention the stakeholder sessions too, which you just did. So there is the opportunity to come early and do a stakeholder session with members of the board.
Yeah. Director Cameron.
Yeah, I agree that there's a stakeholder session. I think there's two things here. One, do we move public comment for this evening? And two, how does our board want to handle stakeholder engagement, period? We have not had that discussion as a board, and that is something that the training has made clear is something that we should discuss. So I would like to make that recommendation for future agendas. I don't think it's our decision to decide if community members should sit through 2.5 hours of meetings in order to address the board. That seems like a big overstep for us. And so I see parents here who I assume want to address the board tonight. I don't think sitting here for 2 hours to do that with young kids is what our goal is as a board, hopefully. And also, I guess I would just like to say with stakeholder sessions, that's not addressing the whole board. So yes, it's an opportunity for people who maybe don't want to be on camera, but it's not an opportunity to address the whole board.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Director Anderson.
I will only just add, I support, I think we're trying to be mindful of our stakeholders' time. And, for me, if they would like to, I do appreciate that our executives are here and people who serve in our administration. But I think for parents and other community members who come to our meetings, they have the opportunity to watch the video at home if they want to watch the whole meeting, if they don't want to stay, if they have to get their kids to bed, that sort of thing. So this was something I tried to email ahead of time. And so, I think we're trying to get a conversation about this going. And I would agree that perhaps a conversation with the whole board about our approach to stakeholder engagement would be helpful.
Yeah, I do just want to reiterate, as Brett noted, there hasn't been public comment as part of the meetings since, mid-2022, and, we made the decision to put it back in to allow people to come and speak. Once again, an opportunity that they didn't have before January. So I'm obviously not opposed to public comment. But there's other ways that the community can engage with us. Obviously, anyone can email us, which is probably even more interactive than then just coming up and speaking for 3 minutes and us not having a response to. So again, it will be interesting, I think, moving forward to see, how many people actually engage in public comment, because I know historically it hasn't been very many. And I've even had emails asking me not to allow certain people to speak on certain topics in public comment over the past couple weeks, which, again, when is it appropriate, when is it not? I'd rather leave it on the agenda and allow people to share their thoughts. Director Cameron.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with you. I'm not opposed to public comment either. I think it warrants a discussion. I think you just said that we made a decision to put public comment on the agenda, and we, as a board, have not made that decision. So I just want to make that clear. We have not had a conversation even about that. I think it's unique that we have it where we have it. Every other school district, the City Council of Lakeville has it at the beginning. And so there's probably, it's just like, why, it makes me wonder, like, people have asked me, like, why do we have public comment buried at the end of the meeting? I don't have a good answer for them. And so if we can answer that, maybe that would be helpful.
So I just want to add that I think one of the things about being on the board is also being flexible to the needs of our community and our district. Typically, when we have public comment, it is adults that are addressing the board about things that they're concerned about. Knowing that there are students here or young children that are here with their parents based on the fact of what they want to talk about, I feel like it makes sense. I would agree to move public comment up for this meeting. I think that warrants a further discussion by the board on where they want it for other agendas, but for this meeting, I think it's important to be flexible to the needs of our community and allow for it to happen earlier so that they can go home and take care of their children.
Any other discussion? Director Carbone?
Yeah, I do think it's important to some degree to have the folks who come to the meeting observe the meeting before they speak. There may be comments made, there may be discussions, there may be a lot of things that could occur that may affect what you have to say. And I think that's part of why it should be a little later in the meeting also.
Director Anderson?
I might also say that if we, like, for instance, when we had the public comment on the meeting related to the posters, that we moved that before our discussion on the posters to make sure that we had the public input. So in my mind, we also are using the information that we get from the public to inform our decision-making. So that's where I would say it's actually helpful to get their input before we're discussing matters.
Yeah, well, and I will say just from a structural standpoint and planning, so public comment, in my view, will always be before we make a vote on something. So that's how it was structured before. There is no recommended action tonight, so there's nothing we're voting on. So that's why public comment is where it is. Otherwise, it would be before the recommended action. Because as you note, what good is it to hear the public comment after you've already voted on the issue? So, but yeah, I won't belabor the fact that I think this might be against our current policies as far as allowing the board to establish the agenda. But if there's no further discussion, any further discussion on the matter?
I would disagree with you on that. A board member can ask to have an item added to the agenda. They just need a motion in a second, and then it's voted on. Yes, the board
But we're not
chair.
adding an item right now.
Right, we're
moving the
moving
agenda.
it, right. But if we can add an item, I think it, when we go through like consent agenda, we can pull items. So why wouldn't we be able to move an item? Because it's not really changing what you put on the agenda. It's moving it for an earlier discussion. I think Robert's rules would allow that. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Quick question. Then, are we allowed to do that before any meeting then? I mean, is that's your understanding then? If we decide we want to move it or push it back or whatever, we could do that at any point in time then?
We've moved items before.
Yeah.
I mean, as board members.
No, I'm fine with that. I'm just, if that's kind of what everybody wants to do, I mean, like you said, we're not voting on anything today, so if we want to move it to the front and let whoever wants to come speak, I mean, I don't have an issue with it. I mean, if that's what we want to do today, then do it.
Yeah, I would say that we should have some consistency in our agenda, though, because you have people that will come later. So whatever we do, yeah. So we're moving it today, assuming everyone's here.
Well, and how does that work then, seeing as we already posted the agenda and the agenda's been out since Friday and all that kind of stuff? I mean, do people, I mean, I'm asking just from the standpoint of community members.
It's a draft of the agenda until the board approves it. So, right, so when we post it online, it's a draft of the agenda, and then the board approves it and makes any changes during the meeting that it sees fit. And again, that comes down to the board being flexible to the needs of the community or the needs of the district during the meeting. If we need to add something as an emergency item, like people are aware of that that's a draft. So moving an item up for an earlier discussion, I mean, the meetings are recorded, so they could go back and watch it at a different date.
Any further discussion? Are we good to vote?
I think it sounds like we might use some training from MSBA on how to handle like this particular situation and how agendas are set. I asked this question point blank at the training on Wednesday, and they said we can bring it up to the chair and or you can raise this as a motion on the agenda. An attorney at MSBA advised this process, so that's what I'm following.
All right, it has been moved and seconded that we amend the agenda to move public comment. Just so I'm clear, where did we want to move public? What was the motion to move public comment to where in the agenda?
Item number 2.
So ahead of the consent agenda. So being moved and seconded, all those in favor of amending the agenda to move public comment to item number 2, say aye.
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 All right, all those opposed say nay. All right, the motion passes. With that, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Motion to approve as amended.
All right, the motion has been made by Director Nicholson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Director Baker. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, the motion passes.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Can you go back to the vote? I don't think I heard a vote from everybody. Or amending the public comment to be in the beginning. It was,
I said yes.
yes, yes. And then no for you.
Yeah, there's 4-2. We good? All right. We will move on to public comment then. The board is going to open up the floor for public comment to allow the public to address the board with comments and concerns. To participate in public comment, individuals must have registered in advance using the form provided on the website by noon on the Monday before the scheduled public comment session. There will be no board response during the session. Public comments framed as complaints and or concerns about students or staff are not appropriate in a public forum due to data privacy laws. These comments should be addressed to the administration outside a public meeting. Likewise, complaints about school board members should be privately directed to the school board chair and or the superintendent. No formal action will be taken on a topic presented during public comment. As necessary, the administration will follow up with the appropriate personnel on any concerns that need to be individually addressed. Also, if necessary, the board will follow up during board communications at the next regularly scheduled board meeting. Individual remarks are limited to 3 minutes, and the board will provide a signal when the participant has 30 seconds remaining on their time. Please try to keep audience noise to a minimum to allow everyone the opportunity to speak uninterrupted. The first individual to speak for public comment today is Corinne H.
Hello, thank you. I'm Kern Henning. I'm just going to, real quick, I just want to read some concerns off about closing the Lakeville Online Academy. Closing the Lakeville Online Elementary means ignoring district policy, ignoring the district's mission to looking solely at costs without considering the financial impact of loss of funding. We are also ignoring the precedent set by the closure of Crystal Lake Elementary School. Closing Lakeville Online Academy Elementary does not significantly improve cost savings. The teachers will remain in the district. The administrative staff already shared among Lakeville Online Academy and Pathways from all available information. Most expenses would be retained with closing the school. However, the enrollment-based funding, based on the information from the year's budget, means we would lose nearly $500,000 in funding as the district is supporting and encouraging transitions to other districts for online schools. All this information is public on the district's website. District policies, among others, here are just a few of which multiple policies that this decision directly contradicts. Policy 209, Code of Ethics, for Board of Education, in working with the superintendent of schools and staff, will, number 6, insist the superintendent keeps the Board of Education adequately informed at all times. 7, offer the superintendent counsel and advice. Policy 301, school district administration. The school board and school administration shall work together to share information and decisions that best serve all needs of the school district students within financial and facility constraints that may exist. Policy 302, superintendent. The superintendent is responsible for the management of the schools, the administration of all school district policies, and is directly accountable to the school board. Where responsibilities are not specifically prescribed, nor school board policies applicable, the superintendent shall use professional judgment subject to review by the school board. Policy 605, alternative programs. It is the policy of the Board of Education that that options shall be made available for some students to select education alternatives that will enhance their opportunity to complete their education programs, reorganizing that some students may become successful learners if given an opportunity to learn in a different environment and through a different learning style.
30 seconds.
It shall be the responsibility of the superintendent to identify alternative program opportunities to be made available to the students who may be at risk, to recommend such alternative programs to the school board for approval. And to familiarize students and the parents of the availability of such alternative programs, the superintendent shall, through cooperative efforts with other schools, agencies, and organizations, periodically recommend additional modified alternative educational programs to the school board. This decision goes directly against policy 605.
That's time. Thank you.
Bill C. There's no last name. I'm assuming you're the only one. No one else is standing up. It's all you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for letting us come up and talk, and I appreciate the spirited conversation about the public comment and the emails, because I did send you guys all an email, and I didn't get one back. So that doesn't actually work. So anyway, I'm here to talk about the Lakeville Online Academy as well. I'm going to read you the email I sent, in case you missed it. Maybe it went to spam. What does home mean to you? To me and my family, my son Jack, right over there, he's embarrassed now, has come to mean the following. A home is something so special, it's indescribable. It's not about the structure, right, or the place or the house, but about feelings and important things like being with the people you love, great experiences and memories. A home should make you feel safe, loved, and special. Jack found that home at LOA this year, just this fall. Okay, he has a long history of cancer treatment. He was very ill for a long time. And I have 4 other kids, 3 other. They graduated from Lakeville, loved the school system. It wasn't right for Jack. Jack went to All Saints because they had smaller class sizes. Okay, got a little bit more love, could maybe keep up, but it was a struggle, right? He missed a lot of class. And then he broke his leg, and they said, don't come back until he can walk again. That's not gonna work. And then we found LOA. At LOA, Jack can learn at his pace. He has doctor's appointments, which I'm assuming a lot of kids do, and things that allow him to miss, cause great anxiety. So he would sit in class, quiet as can be, hoping he wouldn't be called on. Now, he can work at night, he can work in the afternoon, and he can catch up. So it's been amazing. We have an amazing teacher and an amazing staff, and I thank God for that, because it changed his life. So obviously, like the gentleman said earlier, we were shocked, and to our knowledge, it was arbitrarily canceled for the coming year. And my ask is that we don't. Give us a year. We'd like a lot more, but 1 year, right? It doesn't cost us any money. I have an email today from Mr. Baumann. Thank you. I appreciate you sending an email back. And I guess my other comment on that is we would love another year. We would love the opportunity to continue because it fits for our son. And I'm not being selfish. I have to imagine there's a bunch of other people in the program and other places that need that. So in the last 30 seconds, he quoted a bunch of really good stuff. This is your mission statement. The mission statement says, together, every student. The vision says, every person belongs, is valued, and can succeed. Most importantly, our core values and our core goals, 4 out of 5, say students first, excellence, collaboration, and integrity. None of those existed here. All we cared about, to me, because we didn't know about it, was
time.
resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Appreciate it.
Jessica H.
Good evening. Thank you for hearing me tonight. And for those who've been treated to my emails of late, I promise I'll come in under 3 minutes. I know I've timed it. I really just want to thank you. Our world flipped end over end in 2020. As families were thrown into the online void, my District 196 was completely unprepared. It was my mother-in-law who recommended Lakeville Online. Her daughter flourished in it. It had already been tried in a tested environment. See, some may thrive in a brick and mortar building, but not all. Some may need 6 to 7 hours in a change of scenery, but not all. Some have other needs. Some need an environment they can control when the world spins loose. Some need their families close when trust is shaken. Some need the freedom to study when their mind is sharpest and to step away when the strain is too much. Some need teachers who not only know that family comes first, but who value, encourage, and champion it. The educators that this district has filled its halls with, real and virtual, are pillars of strength and integrity. When other districts scrambled, panicked, and apologized, throwing up makeshift online agendas, Lakeville never needed to. They simply opened their doors a little wider, doors already set on solid hinges and stress-tested frames. While others ducked their heads and sought to make the best of a bad, hopefully temporary situation, Lakeville simply said, "Come join us. We know what we're doing." If we didn't know this before, it became obvious from the caliber of teachers you set to lead us. When my daughter wanted to graduate early, they worked with her, respected her right, her need to carve her own path, and they made it happen. Because it is crucial that if we as parents are to share our children with another, that we speak the same language, one of trust, respect, and above all, clear, open, and forthright communication. I don't pretend to understand the hierarchy between educational administration, but if it's in your power, please make sure that those who speak to us here in Lakeville District speak for you as well. For if they don't, better to find this out and address it now than to allow Lakeville's good and upright reputation as a friend of parents and students alike to reflect something Lakeville cannot but shudder at becoming. I don't know if Lakeville has a slogan, now I do, or a mission statement they project to the world. But as things have gone these last few weeks, the only one we've been given is all children are valued, but some children are more valued than others.
30
It's
seconds.
catchy, I'll grant you, but it's not something I'd be proud to stand behind, and Lakeville School Board shouldn't be either. Thank you.
Thank you.
Monica C. Monica C. Lisa M.
Hi. My name's Lisa Martin, 20-year community member here in Lakeville. 4 kids, all went through the Lakeville school systems, 3 traditional brick and mortar.
Can you
1
speak into the microphone just so
yeah.
people can hear you?
Sure.
Thank you.
And 1, my 7-year-old is enrolled in Lakeville Online Academy. I could stand up here and tell you about my kid, but I'm a business person. I'm a vice president of sales for a $7 billion company nationwide, 9,000 employees. Last week, we made the decision to terminate 200 of them because we were looking at a bottom line budget constraints. My CEO looked me in the eye and he said, "Have we exhausted all possibilities?" And we had, right? We did the due diligence. I ask you today to think about employing all resources behind getting enrollment up. If the problem is enrollment, I look to the district to make sure that you're supporting Lakeville Online Schools in the same way that you support the other ones. If you go on the Minnesota Department of Education website right now, right this moment, and you click on Lakeville Online Schools, it takes you to a broken link, a 404 error. So people in the state of Minnesota that are trying to find access to the best, they can't even find access to our program. So no wonder enrollment is declining. So my ask is use the resources that you have for the district to support the social media efforts and the marketing efforts. The teachers in this school should not be responsible for the marketing and the social media strategies for the school. They should not be. They're educators, and they're fantastic at what they do, but this is not what they do great. My second ask, make us competitive. If you look around the school districts, you look to Prior Lake, they have a very robust Spanish immersion program. If you look to over to Farmington, they have a great American Indian program. This sets us apart. It's a point of differentiation, and it makes us different and unique. I ask you to think about how that could be viewed in the day and age that we're in right now. And the second question that I have is around cost per child. As a result of the change that is apparently happening now, we've had to go look for outside education. My first grader, who turns 7 on Friday, reads at a 3rd grade level, and he does 4th grade math. I promise you, you don't want him in a brick and mortar school. He's disruptive. When he gets bored, he gets a little mean, a little naughty. And so we've had to look for outside opportunities. And that, for us, involves private online education. The cost, if I'm going to go pay, is $4,000 to $8,000 if I'm going to pay for private education. So I have a question around the cost of $11,275 for an online child. And I understand that's probably spread across a small base, but I ask you to reconsider this decision and allow it to come before the school board as a vote, as opposed to just an administrative decision. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's the end of public comment. Move on to the consider approval of the consent agenda, which is now item number 3. Any items on the consent agenda that anyone wants to pull out or discuss? If there are none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
All right, the motion has been made by Director Cameron. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second by Director Nicholson. Having been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as drafted for subsection A and B. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. All right, the motion passes. On to the reports and discussion. Starting off with the data dashboard review. Nicole Adams.
Good evening, Chair Swanson, members of the board, Superintendent Bauman. It is our great pleasure to be here tonight to provide you with a overview of our district data. What I want to start by saying is that Nicole is here. She's leading our presentation tonight. We do also have the other teaching and learning directors in the room, Tracy Broval, Director of Technology and Data Services, Sandy Georgie, Elementary Director of Teaching and Learning, and Elida Kane, Secondary Director of Teaching and Learning. This is work that is important to all of us as a team, and so we are here in case there are additional questions or things more specific that you are interested in learning tonight. I do want to start by saying that initially when the request came for this presentation, it was a focus on probably one of the most well-known data metrics, community-wide, parent-wide, student-wide, and that was around the MCAs. That will be a portion of our presentation tonight, but as we go on a learning journey together, what we want to do is sort of ground our work, not only in our local Lakeville data, but in our state data and in our national data. So we're going to paint a picture for you tonight so you can see where the puzzle pieces fit together, how they align, and then what we are looking at specifically here in Lakeville. The second thing I want to just say really quickly before I turn it over to Nicole is I can't think of a better way to start the meeting than with an incredible teacher, Kim Menard, who spoke about teaching, who spoke about the whole child. So when we talk about numbers, we always want to keep in our forefront that there behind every number is an individual child with an individual story, with individual gifts, and with individual challenges. And so I set that frame to say we are going to talk district level tonight, but really what we do in our work, the core of it is about trying to make sure that we keep all of our students who they are, what they need in front of us at all times. So I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, and we will be on standby as needed. Thank you, Nicole.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us tonight. We're really excited to share this presentation with you. As Dr. McDonald expressed, we are going to provide you with kind of an overarching view. As she mentioned, my name is Nicole Adams, and I am the Director of Integrated Continuous Improvement. In my role, I lead and support systems alignment and integration across all of our sites pre-K through 12. We are truly fortunate to have such incredible students, staff, and families in our district, and we actually got to hear from some of them tonight, which was fantastic. We are continually growing and evolving. My responsibility is to develop the systemic capacity that ensures that we can respond quickly and effectively to the needs of our students, delivering exactly what they need, exactly what each one requires when they need it. Sounds really simple, right? But the reality is much more complex, and that is where our work begins. My team's role is to create alignment, consistency, and efficiency across our systems so that our staff has the support that they need to meet the diverse and changing needs of our students. One of the most powerful tools in this work is data. We are, in fact, a very data-rich district, and tonight we're pleased to be able to share some of this with you and the public. It is important to note that when we share data stories, we transform them into actionable information, guiding our strategic decisions and our future direction. It is also important to approach this work through an equity lens, ensuring that each student, regardless of their background, has access to the opportunities and support they need in order to succeed. And with that in mind, my goal tonight is to provide you with a high-level yet comprehensive picture of our district's performance and systems. You'll also be provided with tools to allow you to dig deeper into the data at your own convenience. There's going to be a lot of slides and a lot of graphs. So I will provide you with an overview of each slide. I've tried to anticipate questions that you may have, but I will pause at the end of each slide so that you can ask all of those clarifying questions. If I don't know the answer, and one of my colleagues over here does, I might tap them in, or it might actually be something that we share with you at a later date. So, we will begin by analyzing the academic performance of Lakeville area schools viewed through the lens of national and state educational trends. We'll highlight key data trends and some of the factors that compound effective instruction. Lastly, we will take a closer look at how this data translate into a classroom experience, offering a deeper understanding of the complexities that our teachers, administrators, and staff navigate every day in support of our students. Before we dive into this data, like Dr. McDonald said, I want to take a moment to emphasize the purpose. This presentation is intended to inform and shed light on the complexities of our organization as we work toward improving student outcomes. Both the successes and challenges that we face are shared responsibilities, and we are so glad to partner with you in the cycle of continuous improvement. I also would be remiss if I didn't note that those challenges are not our students. They are never the challenge. The challenge is aligning our systems to better support them. Tonight you'll see some data that highlights some areas where students are not yet meeting these expected outcomes. And while we are deeply concerned, it is also an important opportunity for us to reflect and take action. I, along with every educator that I have encountered so far in this district, share a deep sense of responsibility to support our students, teachers, and administrators. This is a continuous effort, and together we will strive to make the necessary improvements to ensure students receive the support they need. Okay, so here we go, into the data. So we are going to start by looking at some criterion-referenced assessment data. And you're going to hear this a few times tonight, but just as a reminder, a criterion referenced assessment is an assessment that measures performance against a predetermined standard or a specific learning goal. So our MCAs, which Dr. McDonald referenced, are a classic example of a criterion referenced assessment. We will also be looking at some norm referenced assessment data, and that is where performance is evaluated against the performance of peers. A good analogy might be criterion reference is like if you get your driver's license, you have succeeded because you have demonstrated that you are able to drive. A race is more like a norm referenced assessment where a runner their performance is compared to the performance of other runners. Both have value, and we'll talk about where that value lies. We are going to look at some national assessment and some MCA assessment data. We are going to start by looking at the National Assessment Educational Progress data and comparing it to our MCA and our local data. NAEP is administered in even number years every 2 years, so the last administration was in the spring of 2024. The results were released via the nation's report card on January 28th, 2025. Perhaps you've heard about this, it's been very heavily in the news. Students and sites are selected through NAEP. Since this is not a practicality to test every single student in the nation every 2 years, NAEP selects a sample set that represents characteristics of the students in the nation, along with dimensions including ethnicity, school size, socioeconomic factors, gender, and more. When a school is selected for the NAEP assessment, it is because it is statistically representative of a state's schools. Sometimes individual students are asked to participate. If that occurs, it is because that student was chosen at random to represent the state's total students. It is important to note, we do not get individual results. Students do not get individual results. The public gets the totality of the results via what's called the nation's report card. For the purposes of this presentation, we're going to be focusing on math and reading results at grades 4 and 8. The following 4 slides are going to show you national data next to state data as measured by NAEP. You will be able to see trends at both the state and national level up through 2024. And then on the right-hand side of the slides, you will see our state MCA data and our Lakeville area schools MCA data. This, of course, measures our students' proficiency against our state standards. It is important to note, these standards, the state standards, while similar, are not identical to the national standards. So it's not exactly an apples-to-apples comparison, but they are similar. Minnesota typically retains about 80% of national standards and changes about 20% of those standards. That said, they are similar enough that you can see some parallels between the two. I'll pause there if you have questions about NAEP or MCA.
Director Nicholson.
I don't have a question about either of those, but I do have a question about our curriculum. Is our curriculum standardized across all our schools, all our grades? Are we running the same type of curriculum to educate the kids? And I'll get to why I think that's important, but I'm just curious to know how different are every school in terms of what we're teaching them.
Okay.
It's not good behind you. Thank you for the question. So what I can say is that we have a very robust curriculum review process in this district. The purpose of that process is twofold. It's first of all to help our educators understand at a deep level the standards and what they're required to teach. Part of that process then, once that happens, is the selection of resources. So the resources first and foremost have to align to our state standards. Secondarily to that, when we do purchase curriculum, we do so across grade level, program, specific content area, et cetera. So the educators are really involved deeply in making that process. That said, because the curriculum review process only happens about once every decade, what you'll see is in a system our size is that over time you'll have some variation across the system. Part of what Nicole talked about is consistency. I know Sandy and Elida and Tracy also we talk about consistency all the time. So part of our role is to make sure that when we're providing resources, that we are providing them across the system, that we're providing the professional development across the system. So that all is to say, we will find some variation across the system, but for the most part, as we are going through those processes, we are aligning to make sure that we have consistency within those grade levels, schools, programs, and content areas.
So just to clarify, so is it the
Sure.
goal of the district to have, for instance, all third graders are dealing with the same curriculum across
Yeah.
all schools?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that you'll see is we have over time tended to see a higher level of consistency across our elementary because you have all teachers teaching all of the same subject areas, using all of the same materials. So we do have a higher level of consistency there. We see a little bit more variation at the secondary level, but as we go through that process and as the standards come up for review, what we do is try to create that consistency around selection of resources and implementation.
How does it happen where it becomes not or inconsistent? You're saying sometimes we see where it's not. Some people are doing something else. I mean, is that something at the district level where we just say, like, hey, this is the policy, we're all doing this curriculum for algebra in 9th grade? And I guess with that as well, is there like a pacing schedule for each set of curriculum too? So if, we have to move to a different school because we switch homes, that you go into a different third grade class and they're pretty much where you were at the other third grade class in the old school?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that, speaking to your example, is yes, there is a pacing guide in terms of implementation and what needs to be taught when. That said, there are also variations among and in individual classrooms. So you might see that at sometimes some classrooms might be a little ahead, some might be a little bit behind, but essentially they should be covering the same curriculum over the course of a year.
Director Nicholson?
Okay, so that was going to be a question I had too on pacing. Given the fact that these are administered like once in a given year, do we have any issues where certain buildings, certain groups may be ahead of pace and thus their scores represent that? Others are behind pace and maybe that's why their scores don't necessarily reflect as well? Is that something you've looked at? Have you considered? I'm just curious because I've looked at a lot of the MCA data, so I've seen the presentation, I've gone through it. I'm curious to know if that is a known anomaly, problem.
Well, when you're talking specifically about MCAs that are really testing standards and benchmarks in particular, we do look at the data down to sometimes classroom level, depending, but building level for sure, because the standards, if for whatever reason they're not taught, or maybe they aren't taught in a way that students are receiving it or learning it, that will show up. And so what we like to do is, when we look at the MCAs, we're really looking at it from the lens of making decisions about pacing and also about resourcing. So if we see across the board that in 4th grade, students aren't performing well on a specific benchmark, then that tells us that we have a resource problem or we have a pacing problem, meaning maybe the resource we're using didn't really stress that particular benchmark, or maybe that wasn't a focus area for what we were implementing over the course of the year. So it can impact, but we really, in the MCA in particular, it's really more about when we're looking at our system, where are we seeing areas that we need to look at from the system standpoint to either resource differently or pace differently or provide professional development in a different way so that our students have access to those specific benchmarks.
Director Carbone.
Yeah, thank you. Curriculum is one of the tools that shepherds students into academic success. That's absolutely true. But are there academic stress points in that process? And let me explain what I mean. Are there metrics that are followed, for instance, when in the growth and process? So like coming from elementary school to middle school, 90% of pupils are excelling. And then all of a sudden, from middle school to high school, maybe that drops to 60% of students excelling. There have to be stress points in there that you're focusing on and have metrics on that you're analyzing.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Doctor, but will that be coming later?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to...
Yeah, so I think what I'll do is I'll hand it back to Nicole, and she'll provide more detail and more of an overview of where we are.
Right.
Because I think we're going to get to your question and maybe get to some of those other questions as well. I also think, we, of course, after the presentation, our intent was really to provide you with the tools and resources and time to be able to dig in a little bit deeper if you so choose, and then see what kind of questions those bring for perhaps a deeper dive into some other areas as well. So great, thank you for those questions.
Sorry, bear with me just a moment. I just want to get my...
Kind of blew up your presentation there, didn't we?
That's okay. It's perfect because a lot of your questions are in the presentation. Okay, so we are going to move on to taking a look at where our local and state data is situated with national data. So in this graph, there's two graphs. On the left, we see the comparison between national and state data. The mustard color represents Minnesota's trend line, and the black line represents the national trend line. As you can see, Minnesota has consistently outperformed the national average for many years. I should also mention this is fourth grade math. However, it is important to note that Minnesota's trend line has not been above the national average. It's also been running parallel. So that means both are following a similar path over time. Looking at the data, you'll notice that there's a 2-point increase in fourth grade math scores from 2022 to 2024 at both the state and the national levels. However, the peak for fourth grade math scores actually occurred way back in 2013. And after that, there was a pretty steady decline in math scores even before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Sometimes we think a lot of our scores are the result of COVID-19, and certainly that has had a tremendous impact, but it also is situated within a larger trend. That said, there's a positive sign. We are seeing a rebound over the past 2 years, and this could signal a slow recovery in the area of math, especially considering that these fourth graders that have shown this increase were actually kindergartners during COVID-19. There are some important things on this left-hand side graph that it doesn't tell you, though. That is the fact that the majority of the growth that you're seeing is actually coming from students in the top 75th and 90th percentiles. And in fact, students in the lower 25th and 20th percentiles have actually experienced greater declines since 2022, which means that the achievement gap is in fact widening. On the right-hand side of the slide, we will see math MCA proficiency data for fourth grade from the past 4 years. The blue line represents the state average, and the green line shows Lakeville Area Schools average. You can see Lakeville Area Schools has been above the state average since 2021, and in 2024, while the state average declined, Lakeville Area Schools saw an increase of 3.6 points. This is again an indicator that Lakeville Area Schools has some continued progress even amid some broader state level declines.
I had a question on the NAP data.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know why we hit that high mark in 2013 and why it's declined? I mean, is there any...
There's speculation.
Guesses or speculation?
Probably the most significant speculation that jumps to my mind is that 2013 was the year that cell phones and social media became broadly accessible to high school and middle school students.
That's sad. Yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
Maybe you're going to get to this, but if at some point talking about how the achievement gap looks in 194 would be of interest. So.
I have that for you. I have a piece of it for you. I have a little glimpse of it. It is definitely something you could do another whole presentation on. Okay, so now we're going to look at, look at 8th grade math. So same structure. On the left, you see Minnesota, again represented by that yellow line, continues to outperform the national average. However, in 2022, we see the sharpest decline in national scores in history. In 2024, the scores remain largely flat at the national level, but interestingly, Minnesota saw a slight uptick, which does deviate from the national trend. On the right, we have the MCA data for both state and Lakeville area schools, and as you can see, Lakeville does continue to outperform the average. However, while the state saw a slight increase, Lakeville experienced a slight decrease, and this is largely a stagnant trend for the state and also for our district. And while there are variations from year to year, there hasn't been a significant uptick for Lakeville area schools in 8th grade math. And what this tells us at the middle level is that we're seeing little movement or improvement in our math performance. We will have information a little bit later on about what's kind of happening at the middle level and secondary level and some of the compounding factors that are associated with this and some of the steps that we're trying to take to address that. Questions on that? Now we're going to move on to reading. Okay, so this is 4th grade reading. What you need to know here is that nationally, reading scores have declined for students in both grades 4 and 8. In fact, no state in the union made gains in 4th grade reading. The only district that did was actually a trial urban district, and that was the city of Atlanta. Otherwise, no state or jurisdiction made any improvement in reading. As for Minnesota, again, represented by that yellow line, Minnesota has historically been above the national average. However, the state average dropped to meet the national average from 2022 into 2024. Then, next door, we look at the MCA data. We see another stagnant trend both at our state and local levels. Lakeville area schools, represented by the green line, does continue to remain above the state, but did see a slight increase in 2024. Of course, this is not a significant increase and certainly not satisfactory. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those steps, especially with the focus on the READ Act this year and next year.
I did have a question.
Yes.
So on the right-hand side, when we're looking at the MCA data, I mean, we're still down, it looks like 3.7% from 2021 on reading, correct?
4th grade, we increased 1.2%.
From
2021? Yes, that we have not, we had a slight, we have not bounced back.
Yeah, because where were we pre-COVID, just for comparisons?
I would need to pull that up. We were higher, but I would say, Sandy, do you know off the top of your head, or Elida?
Probably Elida's looking at right now on the report card, but it was probably around pre-COVID 69, 70, low 70%.
Okay.
So we came out a little bit stronger, and it's been a slow decline. Again, these 4th graders they were kindergartners during COVID, the first year of COVID.
Would you say, and maybe we discussed this, would you say the MCAs are a little bit more reliable with elementary school students as opposed to older students?
You could possibly. I would say the opt-outs have increased. I would say definitely they've increased more in the past couple of years versus, you just point out 2021, we weren't seeing as many opt-outs. We're actually going to get into absenteeism, and you'll see that there has been a challenge with that. And I think as people realize that there are more options, they're taking those options, and you could extrapolate and say that could be true for MCA participation as well.
Can you explain how the opt-out impacts the scores? Because I thought I mean, I could be remembering wrong, but I thought the legislature addressed that and they changed some of the requirements as far as like how districts were, I guess when I say dinged for students that when they didn't.
I believe that you still get that negative accounting when a student does not participate, but Sandy, you can, or
I thought
Elijah,
it
you can
changed like
correct
2
me.
years ago,
Yeah,
or like a
I
year
think
ago.
it did. I think I saw something that said it's not held against you.
But then again, it's not going to show on recent, it'll show for like from this year on.
Correct.
If it was changed like a year ago, just
Yep.
based on that. But I think that's important to note too. The MCAs, I guess like I have a hard time with the accuracy of that based on like, I feel like our curriculum-based standards are a little bit more sound as far as reliability goes, but, you know, the MCAs have changed over time. That's something to think about. We used to have different testing options for students with disabilities. That's no longer an option, or at least one of them was taken out. There was like an MTOS 2 that was kind of in between the MCA and the MTOS. That one was discontinued. So then there are parents that opt out because it's not really a test that, for example, like I had a child that I opted out because he was in special education, and without that additional option in there, I mean, he's like 2 grade levels behind at least. So what benefit is it going to be for him to be frustrated, right? So that's just a caveat that I throw out there so that people are interpreting this data with caution, and it is very concerning. I'm very concerned about the reading data, but I'm curious to hear what you say next. So.
Yeah, I would agree. There is absolutely no perfect metric, and the MCA certainly is not one. And so that's why we're trying to embed it into the context of some other metrics. We'll be getting into some of our norm reference criteria as well, and you will likely see some parallels there.
Brett?
So in running through this, are you going to show like our FastBridge data and stuff
Yep.
like that you, okay. I'll wait for that.
Okay.
Yeah, if the MCAs are soft as far as analytics, are you going to show some statistics or metrics that you're tracking that become a little more solid in regards to looking at progress?
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you.
And again, I just want to say, we're talking about a variety of metrics. MCAs are just one. They are really, for better or worse, that is the criterion referenced assessment that we have. That doesn't mean that we don't use other things to try to build out that full data picture. And I think you're going to see some of the other metrics that we are using parallel what you're seeing with the MCA data. So even though it is not perfect, and for all of the reasons that Director Baker mentioned, there are reasons why families and students do opt out of it, and they're perfectly valid reasons. We have to take that into account, and we also have to look at it within the context of some other metrics that we'll consider. And we'll finish up with 8th grade reading. At the national level, reading scores remained flat from 2022 to 2024, while Minnesota saw a decline overall. And on the right, our 8th grade data does mirror this trend, showing a 2.5 decrease in performance. And this is another area where we need to dig deeper to understand the factors behind these trends to make necessary improvements. As mentioned earlier, some of the progress that has been seen at the national level has been attributed to proficiency levels among our highest performing students, particularly those in the 75th and 100th percentiles. So the good news is those students are showing improvement, and we're very glad to see that. However, the students, particularly those in the 25th and 10th percentile, they have experienced a decline, which indicates that the achievement gap is growing. And what that means is that the disparity in academic performance between students from varying backgrounds is in fact widening. That is occurring at the national level, the state level, and the local level. We'll dip a very little bit into the local level tonight, but they do impact our metrics. Minnesota, unfortunately, has some of the largest achievement gaps in the nation, particularly when we look at outcome measures based on race and socioeconomic status. It is important to note that these disparities are not limited to students of color. Low-income white students significantly trail higher-income white students across the state. These gaps are not confined to a specific area either, whether you're considering the metro area, the rural areas, whether district schools or charter schools. These disparities are evident statewide, and they are evident in standardized test scores, graduation rates, and college readiness indicators. While graduation rate gaps have decreased over time, racial and income gaps in college readiness have also continued to grow, and later on we're going to see a slide exactly where this shows up in Lakeville. Okay, we are going to consider correlating factors. You've asked a lot of really good questions, and I think all of us are trying to understand, so why are we seeing this occur? What are some of the things that are happening? And there are a lot of reasons. Remember, we're in human development, and so when you're dealing with imperfectly perfect humans, there are a lot of considerations. So these factors, correlating factors, help explain why certain trends or disparities exist in test scores. Understanding these correlating factors is really important for interpreting test data and identifying where targeted support can improve student outcomes. One critical factor is chronic absenteeism, which has been a persistent concern nationwide, as is noted by NAEP. Chronic absenteeism is defined as missing 10% or more of school days during an academic year, regardless of whether the absences are excused or unexcused. This includes both extended absences, such as for illness or family emergencies, and it includes frequent short-term absences. Chronic absenteeism is a key indicator that can negatively impact a student's academic performance, social development, and overall success in school. There are a variety of reasons why students might experience chronic absenteeism. Things such as transportation barriers, the school environment, academic struggles, parental involvement, socioeconomic factors, and even school policies or practices. Additionally, it is worth noting that just as many workplaces have struggled with absenteeism post-COVID-19, employees are sometimes hesitant to return to the workplace and are increasingly seeking remote work. It is clear that a similar pattern is emerging in schools. The reason why chronic absenteeism is so concerning in education is twofold. One, it has a learning impact on the student. Naturally, it stands to reason if the student isn't present, it's pretty hard to learn. We all get that. The other reason is that chronic absenteeism actually places additional strain on the teacher and academic resources and impacts the total classroom environment. Teachers must work harder with students who are frequently absent, which can impact the classroom dynamic. These students are less able to contribute to the learning environment, which can lead to feelings of disengagement and perpetuates the cycle. Moreover, they struggle to maintain positive peer relationships, which are key to school engagement and success. So with that, we are going to look at some national, and then we'll look at our local data on this.
I had a question on the absenteeism. Are we able to track data down to the student where we can show that, hey, look, this percentage of students, these 462 students in elementary are performing
You're going to see that.
significantly less?
Yep. On this slide, I'm sorry, any other questions? I don't want to. Okay. So on this slide, we're just taking another look at NAEP data. They do track absenteeism. Their process is a little bit different. And on the left, you can, this is 4th grade and 8th grade data. In 4th grade, 29% of students indicate that they were absent 3 or more days in the past month. Over time, that equates to a 10% rate of chronic absenteeism. And on the right, 30% of 8th graders. Federal data from 2021 school year shows that at least 14.7 million students nationwide were chronically absent. That is nearly double the pre-COVID-19 number of 8 million students. It is also important to note that as school systems, we analyze both our average daily attendance, or ADA, and the percentage of students who meet the definition of chronic absenteeism. It's important to know average daily membership, you can have a rate of over 90% average daily membership, but still have a chronic absenteeism issue. We look at both. Schools with ADA rates above 97% rarely have issues with chronic absence. Schools with ADA rates between 93 and 97% should be further analyzed to assess the extent of the problem, and schools with an ADA rate below 93% likely face a high level of absenteeism and is generally a predictor for decreased student outcomes. All of that being said, there has been an increase in chronic absenteeism since 2021, and it has not really slowed down. Just as private organizations and businesses are struggling with employees returning to the workplace, that trend is mirrored here, and we're going to take a look at some of our data. So to answer your question, Director Swanson, or Chair Swanson, we closely track attendance data, and we do have a significant number of students across our sites who are struggling with some chronic absenteeism. This is data from our first semester. So these are the percentage of students who are missing 10 or more days of instruction as of January 23rd. You can see that the elementary has the lowest number at 8.84%. That's a total of 462 students. That increases. The percentage increases at the middle school, though the number of students decreases because we're talking fewer students, to 15.09%. And then at the high school level, we're looking at 575 students. Again, that number of total students increases, though the percentage decreases. So over the course of this year so far, 1,077 students are struggling with being chronically absent, and we're only halfway through the year.
Is it full day? Sorry.
These are full day absences, yes.
All right. Director Cameron.
Two questions, and one you might not know either right now. One is, have you been able to track, so for these the individual students in these categories, what their academic performance is to see, like in Lakeville, what is our correlation?
I love that question.
So that's one question. The other one is related to MTSS and behavioral matrix. Are we considered suspensions? And do we do suspensions? Are they considered absentee, or is that a different label?
Those are great questions. I'm going to answer your second one first and then go back to your first one. Your second one, yes, out-of-school suspensions are factored into this because they are absent. And so, yes, they're losing out on learning, even though it is the school that may be asking them not to be there. Yes, we do, and you're going to actually see some behavior data and the most common responses. In adherence with non-exclusionary guidelines, OSS is a possibility in some major behaviors. Yes.
Is that something, and this might be a whole nother thing, but is that the behavioral issues something that our district's thinking about in terms of absenteeism? I know some other districts are moving towards no suspension. It creates challenges in that, like, if you don't have a consequence at times, like you can't correct behavior, so I understand that. And educators, administrators want kids in school. So it's like, how are we thinking about this?
Well, some of that, in 2023, there was statute that came out that requires more non-exclusionary practices. So that in and of itself has kind of changed the face of things. I would say we're being mindful of it. I think it is, generally well understood that a suspension out of school can have a very negative impact on that student and in some ways contributes to the overall environment. And there are times where that might be appropriate. And we do have we have some guidelines and procedures around when that's appropriate, how much is appropriate, and what are the procedures that need to take place to come to that determination and then support the student upon their return. Your other question, as we were putting this together, this is, our system is not fully automated, so a lot of what you're seeing tonight was very much like hand-built, and that would be a metric that we need and want, and that's going to be a hand-built item. But yes, that is information that we need to know because that would give us a very important sense of where do we need to focus.
Feeding off from what Amber asked, you talked about out-of-school suspension. Do we have in-school suspension available at each level of our schools?
I think it varies. You will see some lunch detention, but the in-school suspension is limited. It comes down to resources, and also there's a lot of discrepancy about whether or not that is truly an effective form of accountability.
Okay. What were sorry, you had mentioned some changes in 2023 regarding non-exclusionary requirements. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Sure. It just means that prior to requiring that you are going to remove a student from their educational services, that there needs to be a good reason why, and you have to document what has been done to intervene to ensure that everything that could possibly be done to improve that student's behavior has happened. And we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about behavior and responses to behavior in about 10 more slides. Okay, so now we're going to get into our Lakeville Area Schools data dashboard. Our data dashboard offers an overview of key metrics across the district over the past 3 years. So we have 3 historical data dashboards. We have our current year and then 2 historical. I apologize. This dashboard was developed to visually represent important district and data and provide transparency to the public. This is currently available on our website. The public is able to view it, both our current dashboard and our previous year's dashboard. In addition to all of this, all of the MDE required reports are also available for public access. That includes our comprehensive achievement and civic readiness report, local literacy plan, achievement and integration plan, and American Indian Ed plan. Also, for your convenience, tomorrow morning you will be receiving a login, and you will be able to go to your own website as board directors, and you can review all of this, and you can go down the data rabbit hole as much as you like. And you'll probably have more questions, and that'll actually be great. So just so you know, when you get in there, this is set up with 5 components. First, on the first page, you'll see our self-evaluation data. That's the dials you saw back on January 28th. You'll see an overview of our demographic data. I'm going to share that with you tonight. You're going to see attendance, so you're going to get another look at that. You're going to see more in-depth behavior data, and you're also going to see some academic data. Mind you, I've curated a lot of this for you tonight, so you're going to be able to see more than what we're getting into here. And I just, for the sake of time and efficiency, I didn't want to go through the entire data dashboard, but I want you to have access to that. Also, I just want to point out this data dashboard is not live. It doesn't sync with our student information system at this time. That is a manual update, so as data becomes available, we update it. So it is possible that you might see slightly different numbers in certain situations because it's fluid. Yes?
Can you explain why? Is this a Power BI dashboard, or is this something else?
Our student information system, we just don't have that programming available to us. So right now my team builds this out based on our student information system.
It's not Power BI. We don't have that. The student information system doesn't talk to the database that we have. We're trying to figure out if there's a way to do that, and if there's not a way to do that, what are our other options?
I'll give you a call tomorrow.
Well, hopefully you'll bring a check with you.
Yes. We used to have someone who did a lot of data analysis in the district, who I know left the district. And so we have not replaced that person, or, like, I know you're saying you and your team, but I'm just thinking, it was Andrew Barron. I'm just thinking about and I guess I'm just asking the question if we can provide more support at that
Yes,
level.
thank you for that question, Carly. Since that time, there's been quite a bit of sort of restructuring and realignment. Plus, we've gone through some budget reductions over time, and had to shift some positions or eliminate some positions. So right now, in terms of the data analysis piece, Nicole has a person on her team. She is our data coordinator, MTSS coordinator, and so she's the one that essentially, every time there's a significant iteration of our data, she is basically creating the dashboards, updating the dashboards to do that. So that is one portion of her job. But really, all this, to your point, Director Nicholson, that it's a hand-created document that we have done over the past couple of years to try to get as much data as we can in one place, not only for ourselves at the district level, but for the community as well. So the position has shifted. We used to have a director of data analytics. That position hasn't existed since Dr. Barron was here, and we have had to sort of readjust. So part of Nicole's team, we have someone, again, just part of her position to help facilitate this work.
All right. So with that, we will jump into a brief overview of enrollment and demographic data. Next Tuesday, Tracy Bovold, our Director of Information Technology, will be presenting in-depth enrollment information. And so you may have questions, and to be honest with you, if I can answer them, I will. Or we might table those for next Tuesday because she has a lot of information. I've already seen the slide deck. It looks really good. So I wanted to provide just a brief overview of our student population because it's important to know who's in our schools. Please note that the data you're about to see, especially in the bar graph, is subject to change. These figures are not static, they are fluid, and they may fluctuate as time goes on. So we're going to begin across the top. Let's look at our total enrollment. In the navy blue box on the left, that represents our total student enrollment for grades K through 12. The red box in the middle reflects our total enrollment, including students who receive special education services through our early elementary programming, early childhood programming. And then the box on the right in green shows our total enrollment, including all early childhood programs, students pre-K through 12. The reason that you see varying numbers is due to the fact that early childhood programming is funded differently. Other than special education, these are typically fee-for-service programs, and this distinction is important in understanding the breakdown of these figures. Also, we want to make sure that you understand on the right-hand side in green, it gives you an idea of how very busy our Crystal Lake Education Center is with those students. And they don't normally appear in your typical K through 12 or ECSE through 12.
Just want to add at capacity.
At capacity.
At capacity.
Next, we are going to look at our enrollment data. On the left, that is our federal and race breakdown. As you can see, the majority of our students are white, making up 67.1% of the population. However, it is important to note this number has shifted over time. In the 2022-23 school year, students represented 71.1%, and last year it was 69%. The increases in demographic populations that we are noticing is in our Hispanic, Asian, and Black students, which is a sign of the growing diversity within our district. The next chart you see is our student group breakdown. We have a bar graph that represents the percentage of numbers of various student groups. These numbers do fluctuate. Speaking of special education, during Bill Holgram's financial report last week, a question came up regarding our special education enrollment. Currently, K through 12, it is 16.3%. Director Baker had mentioned that a typical enrollment in a district is 19%. Had we included the ECSE numbers, we'd probably be right there at about 16.9%. But due to funding mechanisms, it's all organized K through 12. So I just want to call out that. 504 plans, that is our next bar graph. A 504 plan is designed to help students with disabilities access the general education curriculum. This is different from special education, which provides specialized instruction. Under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, schools must ensure that students are not discriminated against based on their disability. And in our district, we currently have 328 students with a 504 plan. We have an increase in our English language learners, or EL students. These students come from a variety of language backgrounds with different academic and social emotional needs. It is important to note that we have 673 EL students in our district, and this number has remained pretty consistent over the past few years. That said, the level of support that students require, depending on what their language skill are or how long they have been exposed to academic English, can really vary, and that does shift within that number. And we have seen a little bit of an uptick in our new-to-country students. We have 2,566 students that receive educational benefits. These families qualify based on income, and this helps ensure that these students have the same educational opportunities as those from more financially stable backgrounds. There are just under 2,000 students in our district who are state-identified gifted. It is very important to recognize that these students, just like all of the others, have unique needs that we must also address through specific programming and strategies. Open enrollment. We have 758 students who open enroll into our district from outside the Lakeville area schools boundaries. Additionally, internally, we have 587 students who live within Lakeville area schools and may be going to a school other than their designated home school. Many times this might be due because they are part of a specific program that is only offered at a particular site. Tracy will have a lot more information on that next week. Right, Tracy? Okay. And then lastly, I think it's important to note that we actually do have 93 students who are housing insecure. These students are currently homeless, and they are facing challenges that we also must address. They are covered through McKinney-Vento, which is state statute. We are required to make sure that we are holding space and trying to provide resources for students who are experiencing housing or food insecurity.
Amber.
Two questions. Yeah. One, around the free and reduced. I know there was a conversation when the state went to free lunch for all, that it might affect districts' ability to enroll students who could qualify for services because they wouldn't need to enroll for lunch. So curious, like, have we seen that trend here at all? And then for the 93 students who are experiencing housing insecurity, I know with the budget cuts, I believe, Kim and Carly, correct me if I'm wrong, but we cut a lot of support in our school with the 360 communities positions. So how are we handling that? And are our sites, over social workers or whoever, overloaded trying to fulfill what 360s was doing?
I'm going to answer your second question first. So we do have a staff member, a district-wide staff member, who is our McKinney-Vento coordinator, along with many other roles and responsibilities. She's also helps oversee our EL programming, which is a task in and of itself, and so she is the person who is really doing a lot of that due diligence with identifying students, making sure that she's helping coordinate transportation and other necessities that those students might need. As far as our free and reduced lunch and our Title I dollars, I might let Dr. McDonald, do you want to speak to that? Because that predates my time here.
What's your question about the forms?
Well, yeah, it's kind of like, I think people were concerned that students wouldn't enroll in this anymore because food being the primary need for those kids. But obviously there's a whole other suite of services that they have access to. So have you seen the numbers stay relatively stable, which might not be a good thing necessarily, but like.
This is definitely an area of challenge. Okay. So obviously, it is such a wonderful thing for all of our students to be able to access free meals. In addition to that, the sort of second and third order effects, again, is that in order to access free or reduced meals, students and families would have to complete the form. So you have to qualify, and so they would complete the form and submit it. So there was a growing concern because those forms also get us funding in other areas. So there were concerns for districts statewide saying, well, what's the motivation? Because it asks some personal financial information, et cetera. What's the motivation for people to fill out the forms because they're receiving free lunch. So we have been running sort of campaigns, so to speak, and outreach to make sure that our families understand, number one, not only the importance of the forms for our district, but also that they can receive other benefits if they complete the form and if they qualify. So essentially, it's taken more resources for us internally to try to come with a similar outcome. But we have seen a reduction in the number of forms submitted just because it's not required for the lunch portion anymore. So we're trying to address that any way we can. I know Tracy and her team, we have also our liaisons and others that do significant outreach in the community to help them, to help us, because that number matters not only for lunch but for other funding as well, like Title I. Thank you.
Director Cameron, I just wanted to, I appreciate you bringing up 360 communities, because it was something that was cut within our school buildings, and there's a significant need for that. We received emails last year, especially over the summer, because they're fed during the school year for free, but over the summer, students don't have access to that, and 360 communities has been filling that gap. There's so much of a need in Lakeville that they run out of food almost daily when they're trying to do that in the summer. So I just want to for the community to keep in mind, we look at Lakeville, we look at we got a dome, we have all these wonderful things, there's robust, resources, but there are people in our community that are really struggling to have ends meet there, and 360 Communities has helped to fill that need during the summer.
Yeah. Well, I feel like part of my question was I was able to visit Kenwood Middle School in December, and Principal McDermott showed me around, and essentially that principal is running a food shelf herself in that building, with other staff. And so, I think our staff are stepping up in the absence of these resources, but they have a lot on their plate already, so it's a lot to handle. Yeah.
It is. Thank you. And then lastly on this slide, I just want to point out that sometimes folks are surprised to learn that in addition to English, there are 84 languages that are spoken in homes throughout our Lakeville area communities. As you can see, the top 3 are English, Spanish, and Somali, but I have included the top 10 and the numbers of students that speak those languages. And in the interest of full transparency, if you want to know what any of those are, I wrote them all down. So. Otherwise, a quick Google search works really well. Okay, we had mentioned a little, when we were talking about chronic attendance, we also hit a little bit on behavior, and I said that it would attendance would show up again in behavior, and around, there were questions around suspension, so here we are, back to behavior. Another important factor that, as educators, we always need to pay attention to is student behavior. Over the past few years, nationally, we have seen a pretty significant increase in dysregulated behaviors since students have returned to in-school learning. It's crucial to understand that behavior is a form of communication. It is often serves as a strong indicator of a student's overall experience. It can signal when things are going well, and just as importantly, it can signal when things are not going so well. And this, going back to that statute in 2023, this is why a lot of that non-exclusionary guidance was implemented, was because they want to ensure that as educators, we are really trying to problem solve behaviors and not just correcting behaviors without really trying to get into a root cause analysis. In short, when we consider student behavior, it is essential to look at it from the perspective, not from the perspective of they are giving us a hard time, but rather they are having a hard time regardless of their age. This mindset allows us to respond with empathy and understanding coupled with accountability when needed. So our staff responds to student behavior with a detective-like mindset, seeking to uncover root causes of that behavior. We're going to look at some of our minor and our major behaviors. On the left, you can see our minor behaviors. These are typically classroom or teacher-managed behaviors. If unaddressed, they can become chronic, or they could potentially escalate into major behaviors. That, of course, interferes not just with the student's ability to learn, but also with others' ability to learn. When we notice that these behaviors are more, we notice these behaviors are more common at the elementary level. And on the left, the examples, the top 5 most common minor behaviors we're seeing are things like defiance or noncompliance, physical interaction. Just to be clear, physical interaction doesn't mean fighting. It means like pushing, shoving, tripping, roughhousing, that kind of thing. More impulse control related behaviors that you might see more typically at an elementary age, sometimes with middle schoolers. Distracting behaviors, inappropriate communication, which can be things like inappropriate verbalization, that could be written, could be vulgar language, name calling, that sort of thing. And of course, attendance makes an appearance again with inconsistent presence in class. That one is probably a little more common at the middle and high school levels, where students have the ability to go back and forth between classes. Elementary, they're a little more contained, so it's more common to see students maybe struggling with going from one class to another at the secondary level than the elementary level. And then you can see the top 5 minor responses on the right. So again, all non-exclusionary responses there. When you look at major behaviors, on the right side, these are behaviors that significantly disrupt the learning environment and or jeopardize the safety of the student or others. So this year, we've documented a total of 340 major behaviors, grades K through 12, with the majority of those occurring at the middle and high school. And of those 340 major behaviors, 98 students have exhibited more than one. So there's multiple. It's not 340 students doing this, it's some students have multiple behaviors.
Do you have statistical numbers going back like 5 years to say like this is how many major behavioral issues we had 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah, you'll be able to see that when you log into the data dashboard if you kind of want to look. These data dashboards started 3 years ago. Okay. We'd have to pull like old SIS reports and actually manually pull, but we really started doing a lot of data tracking about 3 years ago.
And is it broken down by grade, or is it just classified elementary, middle, and high school?
I believe it's broken down by grade on the dashboard. Some examples of major behaviors are disruptive or disorderly conduct, insubordination, physical contact, threats or intimidation, fighting, and again, attendance does make an appearance there. And the top 5 major responses are listed there. You can see out-of-school suspension is one of those. Lunch detention, I should point out, that is considered an exclusionary response. That is only occurring at the middle school and high school levels. It is not at the elementary levels, and that is in accordance with non-exclusionary requirements from the state. So, in conclusion, it's vital to remember that student behavior often tells us something about the student's experience, whether things are going well or not so well. And by responding with thoughtful, proactive approach, we can better support our students and address the root cause. Of course, that takes a lot of time and it takes resources to do that, and it does impact our student environment. Questions?
Carly?
With PBIS, when was that implemented? I'm just curious if we have any, I know you're saying the dashboard only goes back 3 years. I said, just be curious if there's any anecdotal or information about whether PBIS has had an impact on this.
I would say we do have some data on PBIS. That was a little bit, some buildings used it, some buildings didn't, and the buildings that were using it definitely were tracking that data and definitely saw an improvement. We've seen a lot of our principals taking that data, using that with their staff and really breaking it down. In fact, I believe on the data dashboard, it'll even break it down by like what day it's most common, what time, what month you see the most behaviors. Spoiler alert, it was October this year. So they have been using that, and I would say a lot of what we were seeing at the site level has kind of been adapted to be more district-wide, but we do drill down to the site as well.
Paul?
Yeah, please. Nicole, I've spoken to a few principals recently, and they speak very highly of counselors and the impact counselors make.
Yep.
How much do you think counselors diffuse this type of slide?
Well, I'm going to speak from my own prior experience.
Right.
I was a high school principal in another district, and we had there's myself, 2 assistant principals, and 4 counselors. Population was about 1,500. If you had asked me, do you want another assistant principal or a counselor, I would have picked a counselor every time. They are essential because they have the skill set and the qualifications to engage in that root cause analysis piece to get to the point where we understand what is that behavior trying to communicate, and they also have the ability to help problem solve that. When you have that expertise and you can build that into a student intervention system, that is incredibly powerful. So I am really thrilled that we do have counselors at our high schools and some of our other sites. And we could certainly use more if possible. Okay, so now we're going to get a little bit into, okay, so you've had a lot of data. What should this look like? How should our systems operate? And you've seen some of this before, but just as a reminder, we've shared a wide variety of unique student data needs that our staff works very diligently to respond. But as we all know, one person alone cannot address all of these needs. And you're going to see towards the end here, what do all these needs look like in a classroom? How do they present? While teachers play an absolutely critical role in this, it is not solely their responsibility. We must build systems that are responsive to student needs, the wide variety of student needs. Just as a reminder, this framework that we use to develop those is the systems of student support. The bottom layer of the pyramid is that foundational piece that is necessary for implementing effective evidence-based tiered interventions. So we actually have a good amount of that foundational piece in place. We've been working very hard at that. We have universal screeners, we have benchmarking systems, we have intervention processes. There are some things that we are still looking to build upon, though, and you're going to see some of that. The importance of Tier 1 instruction. Research indicates that when 80% of a total student population is demonstrating proficiency, that is the sign of a healthy educational system. If more than 20% of your students are not proficient, it will overwhelm your system of intervention. There's a saying in education, you cannot intervene your way out of a Tier 1 problem. In essence, we must first ensure that our Tier 1 instruction is as effective as possible. When it's working well for the majority of our students, we have a solid foundation to build upon. From there, we can begin to provide the more targeted interventions for those who need it. That being said, that doesn't mean we're focusing solely on Tier 1. We do have Tier 2 and Tier 3 systems that are up and running at various places. Those Tier 2 interventions are supplemental. They should be rapidly accessible and matched to student needs. And then Tier 3, those are intensive and individualized. Doesn't necessarily mean one-on-one, but very personalized for the student needs.
Brett, do you have a question?
Yes.
I do. So looking at the MCA scores and the stuff that we talked about before, let's talk about the Tier 1 instruction then. Are we doing what we should be doing? What you just said is 80% proficiency, and you look at the MCA scores across the board. I mean, you look at all of Lakeville, and we're at 58.3 in math, 61.2 in reading, 42 in science. And you just said we're overwhelming the system already. So do we need to reevaluate our Tier 1 approach?
Well, we are in process of, that is our district priority this year. As we talked about on January 28th, our 2 priorities are systems of instruction and parental engagement. And our own self-evaluation reveals exactly what you're saying is our Tier 1 instruction is an area of high concern. And so when we are working on that, that is kind of been where we have spending all of our time and attention this year, with a little bit of extra on that Tier 2 and Tier 3 at the same time. So all of our PD, READ Act, the math curriculum review that's happening, that is all to improve that Tier 1 instruction.
How long does all that take? I mean, we've talked a little bit about like curriculum review and stuff like that, and I've had a chance to talk to other people. I've talked to my wife and people who teach. So why does it always seem to take a really, really long time to make a decision on curriculum? I mean, I thought curriculum, we got case studies, you got other schools that use the material, you have individual teachers review it within your group, right? Like people are looking at this saying it either meets the needs, it doesn't meet the need. I mean, does the state sanction curriculum ahead of time? Do they get certified by the state at all? I mean, is there any sort of guidance from the state? Hey, this curriculum, these meet our standards or don't meet our standards?
Our teachers are the ones, they need to know the new standards, so that's part of what takes a long time, and especially these new standards. And at any point, if Sandy and Elida, if you want, because this is really their bread and butter here, they are incredibly different, and so it does, and as you heard from our speaker earlier, they're requiring new pedagogical approaches, so it requires a lot of PD on the front end. You have to understand the standards first before you can choose a resource that's going to be appropriate for that. I would say on average, it takes about 2 years to fully implement, and then you have to evaluate following implementation. But I'll let you guys jump in.
Kind of nailed it. Good job, Nicole. That is exactly what I was going to come and say. It does take anywhere between 1 to 3 years. As Nicole said, we have to deeply understand the shifts to the standards. Not only the standards, but what we teach in the classroom at each individual grade level are benchmarks. So for example, there might be 10 anchor standards across the K-12 reading, but that might mean then at the 8th grade level, there are 50 benchmarks that teacher is responsible then for teachers for kids to understand, be able to do and master. So we have to understand what that means. When we look at a single benchmark then, we unpack them. That means we read it and what does it mean? There are often anywhere between 1 to 4 learning targets in that benchmark, which means your 50 benchmarks have now become up to 200 benchmarks. So we then have to prioritize those benchmarks. Which ones are going to provide leverage, readiness, and endurance in order for students to be successful at that grade level and beyond? And then what curriculum resources and tools do we have? And then what do we need to match that? So it is not a quick, easy, simple process. And someone asked if the state provides curriculum to us. They do not. That is up to us.
If I may, if I remember Bill's presentation a week or so ago, one of the lines, I believe, was curriculum, and it was reasonably expensive. It's very expensive. Not reasonably, very expensive. That being said, who tracks the return on investment on that? I mean, we're spending millions, I think, and that being said, again, who's analyzing that and making sure that we are getting a return on the investment and it is equaling academic outcomes, going upward?
Yeah, I'll just interject for just a moment. What Elida said is a process that we have across our system, K-12. She is correct. The state of Minnesota does not identify curriculum. However, with a little thing called READ Act, that has changed slightly in the area of literacy at the elementary level as it relates to core resources and for interventions. Currently, the state identifies and looks at resources, and they identify it as highly aligned, partially aligned, or not aligned. The state is still in that process. Right now, they only have one resource that they have identified as highly aligned for a comprehensive. They still have up to, I think, 12 that are being in reconsideration. They are overwhelmed. So as you can imagine, as a district, and we're looking at elementary, we're waiting for that research to come in. But to your point, Director Carbone, one of the pieces that we look at when we think about a return on investment is we look at the data. For example, Nicole will be visiting a little bit more what that looks like for Fastbridge. One thing we did particularly at the elementary level as it relates to the science of reading is we looked at our data at early literacy, and we noticed that there was some gaps in that data. As a result, we redirected our resources and identified what curriculum should we put in place to help support things such as phonics, phonemic awareness, all of those pieces that come into place for early literacy, and we made those adjustments.
So that's the Hegarty piece, right?
You're correct. You got it, Director Nicholson. So one of the things that we just recently did is we updated our Hegarty resources. We had an older one from 2020. We updated those pieces, and we're currently doing training. Some of you might even see some of the homeschool connections that we just recently published to support our families with that as well.
So that was one question that I got into a lengthy discussion about was Hegarty and why doesn't it seem to carry past like second grade or something? Like why is that? Like we seem to, you know, especially looking at like our stuff, you know, we see sort of this drop as they, you know.
Yeah, very good question.
Like they're very good, but then all of a sudden it's like we drop off as we get to like middle school and
So,
stuff. It's
so
like, why?
very good. When we look at Hegarty, it's particularly around phonemic awareness, which is really when we're thinking about our K-1 learners. With the new Hegarty resource that we just recently adopted this year, we did make that shift where it is fully implemented in a Tier 1 structure for K-1. And then Hegarty is used as an intervention beyond first grade. So we do utilize that resource as an intervention moving with second grade moving forward.
And this is not really, it's a question comment. You know, I think as hearing what you said about Tier 1, I had the same kind of thought as you, Brett, about, you know, we're not at 80%, right, for a lot of the metrics, not just MCAs, but me. I'm interested in the Fastbridge because I feel like that's more summative assessment. And I think what I'm learning a lot tonight is that we can have the best curriculum that money can buy, but if kids aren't showing up and if behavior is a challenge, which 15% of our kids already are at the secondary level or are gone 10 or more days, it's only been half the school year, you know, that we need to couple our curriculum and instruction with these other supports, right? And so these things don't operate in silos. And I mean, you've taught me that, so I'm trying to reiterate back to you what I've learned.
Brett. Quick question on like the MCA scores, because I found some interesting state targets or whatever they say they have on there, which for whatever reason, as I click through all the individual demographics that you could select, they're all at 85%. But then when you select the actual school, the goal is 90%. Has anybody reached out to the state and said, how are we supposed to do that? Like, even if you hit goal, if all of your individual dynamics based on all the, you know, race, ethnicity, and whatnot, all of those are at 85%. How are we supposed to get to 90? Like, if that's the goal. It's an impossible goal. Like, I'm looking at it going like, well, how is, like, why would they even do that?
Ask the state.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, I think it goes back to that idea of why wouldn't we want our goal to be 90%? Why wouldn't we want our goal to be 100%?
To that end, why
we would want 100% of our kids to be proficient in everything. So
then why in the demographic group, why would we only shoot for 85? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And then, you know.
My hunch around that is it's around the achievement gap in the state of Minnesota, since it is so large, that start something that might be more attainable first.
I think what you're speaking to is the ESSA goals that came out a number of years ago that replaced No Child Left Behind, and they established that 90% goal. I think I'd like to go back to what Director Adams had mentioned. When we're really thinking about, you know, Tier 1, we're really thinking about a healthy system of having 80%. Once you have an upside-down triangle, it really puts stress on your system. And so best practice will say shoot for that 80%. But what I think you're mentioning is that shift from No Child Left Behind to ESSA, and then they decided maybe arbitrarily 90%. Not really sure on that one.
Do we have any sites that currently hit that 80% goal?
It's funny that you say that. So the individual that we had mentioned earlier, Cheryl Gangler, who is our data person, she was working diligently this morning and finishing some of our fall to winter data. I was on a call with her this morning and looking at it, and particularly, and I can only speak to elementary because that's where I was focused in on, we have a number of areas in our schools, particularly in math, that is reaching that 80%. And of course, I was zoning in on the areas that we're working with at elementary with our new resource with Bridges in 4-5, and a number of our sites are hitting that metric.
Kim?
Sorry, you're going to have to deal with a little educator tangent here. As I sit and listen to this, I hear all the data. I love data too. And it's one thing I think we're missing is the biggest correlation that no one's mentioned yet, which is how teachers, the decline of people entering the teacher education program. And when I look at that, for the past 10 years, it's 45% decrease in most of the states. It kind of leveled off in about 2021, except for the state of Minnesota, which was one of 11 states that continued to see the decline in people entering that teacher education program. If you go back and you look at when that decline started and you look at our scores, it's directly related. You can see the line just go down. When we stopped getting teachers into our programs, our scores in our schools started to go down too. And I kind of relate that back to curriculum's important. It's great. I love all the things that you guys have said about curriculum. I could talk curriculum with you all day long. Curriculum is our roadmap, but our teachers are the ones that are the master navigators. They're the ones that we're completely lost without. They're that little thing on the compass that tells us where to go. That's who's doing it. You can give a teacher any curriculum. If they're a master instructor, the class is going to meet benchmark by the end of the year. Our teachers are everything, and we're losing them at drastic rates. And if you look at like special education, that number is 80% decline in teachers that are actually entering a special education program. I can give you just a little bit of data because, like I said, I love data. In 2011, nationwide, we had 684,000 people entering the teacher education program. In 2020, we were about 400,000. It's a huge decline. And one of the reasons that people aren't entering that program is respect for our profession. It's the fact that the job is harder, interventions and trying to meet all those needs without the supports that are in place, not having enough counselors to support the work and the behaviors. It's all of those things. Like even when we have discussed this several times, we could use so many more teaching and learning coaches that are in the classroom supporting teachers' work. The mentorship program to support new teachers so that we continue to come back. So I look at this and I say, yeah, this is important and I'm concerned about the data too, but our number one priority has got to be attracting and retaining our master teachers and their staff.
I had a question.
I was just going to say too, thank you for your perspective. I also think, when we're looking at how Lakeville area schools district is changing and how demographics are changing in our schools, that's another thing that we should always be thinking of as we're comparing ourselves to kind of landlocked districts that really aren't changing in demographics too. And so that's one thing that I think can overwhelm our system is just there's just constantly a shift in what our teachers are having to think about and who they're having to support in different ways, so.
Just feeding off from Kim's comment, I was wondering, how do we identify and assess our teachers to know, like, which are our all-star teachers? Which ones, especially when we're hiring new teachers every year, how do you identify whether or not, these are teachers that we want to invest in and continue on, beyond?
We're consistent with state statute and we follow the teacher development and evaluation process. Also a robust hiring process that involves panel interviews, reference checking, and then of course our site principals are absolute linchpins in all of this because they're the ones that are in the classrooms, they're seeing what's happening, and they're working with those teachers, and their primary role in an ideal world is that they are instructional leaders and able to provide that support and development for those teachers and really try to make sure that we are growing our teachers to be all-stars, as you said, and providing that's part of what this data is too, is where do we need to offer professional development to be able to better support. Additionally, I should point out that we're focusing a little bit on instruction, but systems of support also applies to behavior and social emotional learning as well. And there are tiered interventions for that as well. We would love to see that get more robust to share some of that burden with our classroom teachers. But to go back to your question, it is a process of constant classroom visits, evaluation. Reflective practice is incredibly important in developing your craft and skill as a teacher.
I think coaching, like our instructional coaches are just vital to that process. I don't know how many times that I had reached out to an instructional coach and said, hey, I noticed this, I need some support. They come in and they observe in the classroom, they make sure that your curriculum's being implemented with fidelity, they provide suggestions, they're looking at your teaching and trying to figure out, what's the missing piece. I mean, they're just vital, and I wish we had about, 50 more of them so that we could support more of our teachers in the classroom. But, I think just going back to coaching, our principals should be the master coaches in the building. Our instructional coaches should also be there. But as a teaching team, we need to learn to coach each other too in the process. Like sometimes I would go observe one of the other teachers in my building just to get ideas, because you walk down the hallway and you're like, hey, that's really cool. Why didn't I think of that? And the milk in the little tray there. Those are great things that we learn from each other. It's just a constant learning process.
Do the principals and administrators have access to classroom data as far as, how the interim assessments are going?
Yes.
For each grade level, so they can identify and maybe provide support where needed?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Is that on the data dashboard as well?
It is not. You'll see all district level data at this point. Okay, FastBridge. So we saw some criterion referenced assessments before, and we are getting into our norm referenced assessments. So just a few notes on this. It is important to know that the norm reference assessment that we use as FastBridge is a general indicator. We used FastBridge as our universal screener. This data shows us that how our students are performing compared to their peers across the same age, at the same age across the nation. As you know, FastBridge is a general outcomes measure, meaning it is predictive and gives us important insight into the types of skills that a student may need to develop in order to succeed in future criterion reference tests like the MCA. However, it is important to note that FastBridge does not measure standards directly. It measures skills and gives our teachers a sense of where their students might need further development. So when we're talking about 80% proficiency, if you look at this universal screener for reading, that tells us we are striving for 80% proficiency at benchmark. And it's probably a better term, at benchmark. Yes.
Yeah, please, Nicole. When I look at those 10 bars, 8 of them dip in winter or plateau in winter. Why wouldn't you, if you're learning from fall to winter, actually get better?
Good question, and I'm going to point out just 2 things. First of all, kindergarten and first grade. I want to point those out. Kindergarten and first grade, it looks like it's growth. I think that's a little misleading because all of the other grades, they give the same probes at increasing levels of rigor from fall to winter to spring. So they get tougher as the year goes. It's not the same probe every single time. Versus kindergarten and first grade, they're new sets of skills because for those kids, they're foundational literacy skills. It's the first time they're seeing that. So they start the test, they take the universal screener in the fall, it measures what they already know, they learn the thing, and then they move on, and it measures the next skill set. Versus 2 through 9, it's more comprehensive. So what this might suggest when you see this decrease from fall to winter is that it might indicate that our rigor is not keeping pace with the assessment. So this is something that we are currently addressing through our standards-based review cycle. The new standards that have come out are actually at a much higher level of rigor, and they are requiring a depth of knowledge of 3. It's on a scale of 1 to 4. It used to be the MCAs would kind of accept a level 2, which is more like recall, versus depth of knowledge 3 requires application and connection to other concepts. And so FastBridge also basically is assessing at a higher level of rigor, and so that's an area of improvement for us. Sandy, I know you spend a lot of time on FastBridge. Anything else you want to say about that?
What Nicole mentioned is correct when we think about K1. So they might in the fall be being assessed on letter names, and then when it comes time for winter, it might be onset sounds or it might be segmenting and blending. So it's really hard to show growth from K and 1 because the probes are not the same from fall, winter, and spring. They change based on the developmental needs of those K1 learners. So that's really the significant difference between K1 and then starting with second grade.
So and I'll just take the K through 5 group because I might have a little bit more insight into some of that, but is most of it timed?
So when we think about the assessments that you have here, you are correct, Director Nicholson, when we're talking about the K1 probes. They're usually 1-minute probes that the student has. When we look at starting with the A reading or A math starting in grade 2, it's not timed. Most students take about an hour to complete those assessments.
So do we get more information than just, like say K1, do we get more than just the kid knows 5 letters? Or is that really all we get? Because I've had a long discussion about that one. I'm like, if this is a computerized test, they should tell you which 5 letters the kid was able to recognize. Okay,
yep,
so
and it does. It'll tell you which letters those are. Okay. In addition, when we think about the norm reference test of the FastBridge, which is a general outcome measure, we look at that assessment to support us as a universal screener to give us a sense of where that student is at. We also use this assessment because it's extremely sensitive and we can do progress monitoring. So when we do an intervention, we can then, based on your return on investment, be able to determine based on progress monitoring whether that intervention is working or not. After around 6 rounds of that, you'd want to change that intervention and then rethink of what that looks like. The other piece, too, is we have assessments that are diagnostic. So if a child is having challenges, we can utilize other assessments that we have within our tools to help support drive instruction.
And then do we have, sorry.
Okay.
I was just going to say, is there kind of, is there a weekly data day or something like that, or every month? Or like when do you guys sort through it and say, hey, we've been pulling 6 kids, now we only need to pull 4 of them, let's get 2 different ones who are, maybe low in certain areas or whatever. You do that frequently, weekly, monthly?
Yep, so one of the things that we have across our system are professional learning communities, or PLCs. They do meet on a weekly basis. At the elementary level, it tends to be Wednesdays. I'll be quite honest, with the READ Act, it's coming into some of our time because some of those Wednesdays we do need for that training. But you can expect that without READ Act, it's happening on a weekly basis. With READ Act, the teachers have 2 times per month to be able to collaborate as a PLC, look at their data as a collective whole, and then make decisions. In addition, after each assessment cycle with our FastBridge at the elementary level, we do have data digs. They work directly with our learning specialists, which leads some of those conversations with those PLCs. Our learning specialists are also working with vertically aligned PLCs. I was just recently at Oak Hills. That learning specialist was working with the kindergarten and the first grade PLC, looking at what those gaps are when we're thinking about that progression of learning across those early literacy skills. So the PLCs can happen horizontally, they happen vertically, and there's special times throughout the year where there's a full data dig. Many schools may spend a half a day.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah.
For FastBridge, if a student is, I forget how that's categorized, but like some risk or high risk in the assessment, that signals, right, that you could offer targeted services to that particular student. You need parent permission for that, is that correct? And what happens if you don't get parent permission?
Yeah, so we do have a process with parent notification if a child is not meeting benchmarks and they are receiving intervention. Certainly a parent can opt out of that service, and that does happen at times. But we really do have those conversations with those families to really help them inform what that opportunity would look like for students.
So we just took a look at reading. Same Fastbridge School. I should also point out, too, this is the first year that ninth grade has used Fastbridge. So that's new to the high school this year, so new tool for them. And here are our math universal screening data showing fall to winter growth. So everything that Sandy just shared would really apply to this as well. We also, just like we look at proficiency, we also use rates of growth, just like benchmark is a key factor in assessing student progress. Growth metrics refer to a student's progress over time measured by comparing their scores on assessments taken at different points throughout the year, represented by a growth percentile, which shows how their growth compares to the growth of other students within their grade level nationally. So growth is measured and nationally normed. 60% is saying that 60% is our growth goal. To answer Director Cameron's question, we look at growth at flat, modest, or typical, or aggressive. And research indicates that if students are achieving growth at 60% rate, that's a generally pretty good indicator that they are going to be on target to be proficient by the end of the year. So here you see that red line across it in dashes. That is average growth, that is the target. And if we are under 60%, that may indicate an area of intervention for those students. And you can see reading on the left and math on the right.
So just one question. So when I look at the math screener, it looks like we're making pretty good growth in most of the things, but on the previous slide, I kind of see this downward trend with our math scores. Is that something that you're seeing from year to year? Like, I guess when I'm seeing the growth, like I would expect to see more from those screener numbers as far as the skills. So it makes me wonder if the curriculum doesn't quite have the rigor that is needed. Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. And I think, as Director Georgie pointed out earlier, there has been a shift, particularly at 4th and 5th grade. We have seen Bridges is the new curriculum that's been implemented this year. So that there is some evidence that might actually be making some impact there. Why it is not quite showing up here. I mean, in 4th grade, there is a 1% increase, and then it's pretty stagnant. So I don't have an answer for that question specifically. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to think that might be a pretty positive highlight.
We have some outliers too.
Yeah.
I think we have some outliers too when we look at that data. Are we operating off of this one? No. Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah. I think sometimes when you look at this, there might be some outliers too from different sites that might be showing what this data looks like. For example, due to the size of Orchard Lake, that particular building, the whole entire building is in READ Act training this year. Whereas our other buildings, we have K-3 in READ Act and 4-5 working with us specifically as it relates to our math standards and alignment to bridges. Orchard Lake hasn't had any of that PD because in that particular case, you might have 2 fifth-grade teachers. It didn't really make sense to have one fifth-grade teacher working on math and the other fifth-grade teacher working on literacy. They weren't able to collaborate then within their PLCs. So when you're looking here, that's an overall average with proficiency, so you might have a few outliers in that piece.
Is the Bridges curriculum, is that just for 4th and 5th grade in the math?
No, thank you for that question. So it is a curriculum that we will have K-5, but again, this little thing called READ Act, we took advantage of it. This year, we were required by the Minnesota State statute to have READ Act training in place. It was also required for Phase 1 teachers, which are K-3 teachers. So I took advantage of that as it relates to our calendar. So our K-3 teachers were in 60 to 65 hours of READ Act training, and then our 4-5 teachers were in training as it relates to the implementation of bridges. Next year, we'll flip-flop. Our 4-5 teachers will be in the READ Act training, and then our K-3 teachers will be in the bridge training. So then we'll have full implementation K-5.
So is the current, like, K-3 on a different curriculum versus 4th and 5th
Yes, they're in
grade?
our
Okay.
existing curriculum, which is an older edition of math expressions, and then they will transition into our bridges curriculum.
Paul?
Yeah, please. Nicole, could you go one slide forward, please? Yeah, that one. Point of clarification, am I reading that properly? It looks, I think this is what I'm seeing. 6 through 9 in reading and 6 through 9 in math, they're not hitting the 60% threshold that you're looking for. Am I reading that correctly?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay.
That is correct.
Can I ask a question about middle school just generally, because
Sure.
it seems to be lagging under both indicators. And I don't know if this is just from my son's experience, but is it a policy where, like across all of our middle schools, where you don't have to turn in your homework until the end of the quarter or the semester and you can retake tests multiple times?
I do believe there are policies in place around having some flexible deadlines to ensure that students do have the opportunity to complete assignments, and I do believe there is flexibility in retaking tests as well to ensure that the tests are assessing what students know.
And are those new policies?
I believe they've been in effect for about 3 years. Is that right? 5?
I mean, have we seen similar results? I mean, because we're talking about rigor as being, a good indicator of maybe improvement in other areas. I mean, it seems to me, just a layperson looking at that, if you don't have to turn in your assignments on time or you can retake your test multiple times, I mean, isn't that the opposite of establishing rigor?
Research rigor is really demonstrating what students can know and do at high levels. And when a student does that, the idea is that time can be the variable. Knowing a student demonstrating it should not be the variable. So evidence, there's a lot of research around this. That could definitely be another whole presentation. And there are a lot of schools, for a lot of reasons, to make sure that we are holding students accountable for knowing things, not being compliant with deadlines, is the rationale behind it.
Correct.
Okay.
Brett?
Then I kind of want to just ask the glaring question then. I mean, do they actually know it? Like when we look at the composite data here, we look at all the different stuff. I mean, we're hovering in the 60s, 70s at best. I mean,
well,
so
this would indicate no.
Well, okay, that's what I'm asking. Like, so to the rigor question, I mean, if you look at, just high, real broad stroke. I mean, we're trending downward more than we're trending upward. So if we've had this policy in place for 4 or 5 years, I mean, is this actually working?
I would just point out that this is not measuring academic dispositions. This is measuring skills. We are going to look at some grading data, which I think gets more to what you are suggesting, and that might be a better spot to engage in that conversation, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
And I would like to add, particularly for both math and reading at the secondary level, we have
Microphone.
just started this curriculum review-based process because the state has not changed the standards. So we are just engaging right now, starting this year with both groups. We have grades 6 through 8 and 9-12, both ELA and math, who are starting that process. They are digging deeply into the standards, the pedagogy, the instruction, and the shifts. So we will see changes coming. It's just going to take time now that we have the opportunity in front of us.
Kim?
So just thinking back to the tier 1, 2, 3 slides that you have, do you have those robust interventions in place in the middle school yet?
We do not.
Okay, so that would be.
That is a big challenge for us at the secondary level. We do not have the capacity, we do not have the schedule, we don't have the people for that, and it is something that is greatly needed. When you think about a single math teacher who sees 150 to 175 kids a day, 50 minutes at a pop, I might notice that students in my class are struggling, but again, we don't have any time carved out for myself as a teacher then to work with Kim one-on-one to do something. We don't even have a schedule that allows flexibility for our students to get that additional time too. So that is something as a district I think we need to really look at to support our students and our teachers with that work.
So I want to ask a question about assessing, because we do a lot of assessing, and I think at one point in time it was stated that we basically assess right up to the maximum hours allocated by the state. So like we assess a lot. Are we assessing too much?
I think almost every educator would say that we feel like we assess too much, but part of that is because we're required to do assessments that, like the MCA, it kind of is green light, red light, but it really doesn't give us anything to really help us. But then we need assessments like this, and we need our classrooms assessments because that is the actual data that I have in front of me to make movements in my classroom.
Amber, you had a question?
Can I just follow up on Director Nicholson's question? Also, classroom assessments are really probably the most usable form of data that teachers need in order to inform their next instructional move to ensure that they need to know what are students able to do and then either reteach that in a different way or move them into an intervention. And through the standards-based review process, that is something that needs to be developed so that it is consistent, so that we have evidence that they know the standards, and that would probably be the most useful form of assessment for us.
We don't have to go on this tonight necessarily, but at least at the high school level, would a block schedule better allow for what you're talking about, Elida? I'm aware of lots of high schools, right, that do block, and there's a lot of benefits, I'm sure, and
So we have a
negatives.
6-period day, for those of you who don't know, which is probably the smallest schedule you can possibly have. So for our students, they can only take 6 classes a day, which is limiting in of itself long-term in terms of electives that you can take, choices that you can have, and then heaven forbid you do fail a class because you're going to have to make that up, which will then chip into your elective time. I don't know what the best answer would be for our staff, our community, and our students. I have my own opinions, but yes, we could do a 7-period day, we could do a block day, we could do tries, I would like to do modified schedule 2 days a week, where then we could really build in that time and that space for kids to get what they need and teachers to be able to grab those students that they wanted and not be set to a rigid schedule and expand opportunities for kids too.
Just on that note, there are very few comprehensive high schools in the state that still have a 4-period day or a block schedule. They were really popular in the 90s and the early 2000s, and schools have typically migrated away from them. The big barrier on those being that, for instance, you would take an entire year's worth of content and you have it in semester 1. So, for example, if you're taking math semester 1 and then you don't have math scheduled the next year until spring semester, you've gone essentially a whole year without math. So that's one of the big challenges with a block schedule. There's no perfect delivery system, but that's one of the considerations with a 4-period day.
I have one more question for Elida now that she walked all the way over there and sat down.
Sorry.
So what do you think's going on with middle school and the test scores here?
I think a lot of things are happening. I think that we need to do a curriculum review process. It's evident. We haven't had new curriculum. We haven't had professional development in over 10 years. It's a real thing. It's a real honest thing. Please know that our teachers are highly engaged right now. They are showing up to our meetings. They are actively engaged. They're excited about the new instruction and the new pedagogy, and they are crying for this. They have been for a long time. I'm going to go back to what I said a few moments ago, is that we also do not have any intervention supports in our buildings, and that's not on our individual teachers. We don't have the time, the space, the people to do what give those kids what they need when they need it. So that is a real big thing too. And then I think there's a lot of other factors with middle schools. I'd love to do deep research on the fact that kids come from a community, a home school for 6 years where they know a few people who nurture them and love them and care for them. And now we're in a middle school where I have 6 different teachers who have 6 different expectations, and I have to remember my schedule and all of my things, and I've got hormones happening now too. So there's also a lot that happens to middle schoolers that we don't get to control as well. And then, as Nicole mentioned earlier, attendance starts to really become an issue starting in middle school as well. So if you're not in class, you can't learn, and like I said, you're missing a lot. One day, one section of math, you're missing a ton right there. So there's a lot.
Can I just ask, just from your experience, is this consistent with what you see in middle school? Like for Lakeville?
For Lakeville?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say it matches. Did you have a question?
Carly?
Yeah, I was just going to ask. I know you mentioned some of the things that create impediments. What do you think the solutions are to get that up?
Well, I think the number one thing we're doing right now is starting that process, getting the teams together, getting the teachers together in the room to make new decisions together collectively on the teaching and learning in the classroom, looking at creating the new assessments aligned to the updated benchmarks so we can PLC it at a higher functionality, And then I do think, again, as an entire system, we need to evaluate our finances, our support, so that we can get interventions in the program. Because as Nicole said, you can't intervene your way out of anything, but when kids come to first grade behind, second grade behind, third grade behind, fourth grade behind, fifth grade behind, and then to us where there are no interventions, our students aren't getting the supports that they need.
Carly, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to point something out, and I'm interested to see if you agree with me. I just think we've been talking a lot about cell phones and how they are not happening in the elementary school for the most part, or the principals aren't really concerned. I'm interested to see kind of the crackdown that we've been hearing about that's happening in the middle schools this year, if that leads to improvement, because we know mental health and cell phones and what is happening is an epidemic itself, and how that impacts these scores and how our students are doing. And I mean, I just have lots of thoughts about that, but I hope that we see improvement with kind of the changes that our principals have talked about this year.
And I know that Dr. A and Principal Woody spoke on that, I believe, last week or the week before. And I would agree that when I visit the middle schools, I really don't see the cell phones out ever, anywhere. So they are doing a really wonderful job mitigating that. When I'm visiting classrooms at the high school, I'm not seeing them in the classrooms, where our students are very respectful there. They are in the halls, of course. I mean, it's their culture. So
I think relatedly, and again, this is not for tonight, this is like education in general. I think the amount of iPads, the screen time, to what extent at the national scale, at the Lakeville scale, is that impacting students' learning ability? Like, we know at young ages, the more screen time, the less brain activity is happening, right? So I get that parents want one-to-one devices, and it's like an exciting thing to offer, but at the same time, I'm interested in like longitudinal research to say, like, is this actually the best way for kids to learn? And I think there's probably differing opinions on that.
yeah, there's research on both sides, right? It's one of those things, for sure.
I'll second that motion to cut out iPads for certain grades. Yeah. Is that our decision, or is that a? No.
Okay, so with that, now we're going to look at intervention data, which you guys have already started to venture there, so this probably will not come as a surprise to you. So as you've seen on the previous slides, there's a clear need for a stronger focus on developing robust Tier 1 instruction. Remember, our goal is 80% proficiency, and while we are not yet there, it is important to recognize that doesn't mean that we're not going to work on also developing our Tier 2 and Tier 3 systems. We still have an obligation to do everything we possibly can to try to assist students. So this slide illustrates where interventions are taking place, as well as the types of interventions that are being implemented. You'll notice that we have the highest number of interventions occurring in grades K and 1. This is because early intervention is key to getting more students proficient, and the sooner we can address learning gaps, the better the long-term outcomes. Early intervention is a major reason for these elevated intervention numbers in K and 1, focusing on establishing foundational skills. These are crucial developmental skills in literacy and numeracy. When we support these skills early, they help prevent the need for more intensive interventions later. Building a strong foundation now reduces resources down the road. However, as you can see, at the middle and the high school levels, the percentage of students participating in interventions is much, much smaller. And for the reasons that Elida just stated, we simply do not have resources to offer those interventions at the middle school or the high school. And so that is an area of great need for this district.
I have a question. I don't know if you can answer it, but for the students that received interventions at the elementary level, what's the percentage of those students then qualifying for special education?
Ooh, that's a really good question that I do not have the answer to.
Well, because then I was just thinking, like, if that keeps our special ed numbers down, and then we don't offer those interventions in middle school, then statistically you would think that our numbers would be higher in the secondary level, and we want to keep those special ed numbers down, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the that is an important facet of multi-tiered systems of support, is finding interventions that are going to support a student need that are not special education. So it's really designed in part, in its origins, to decrease the number of referrals into special education. And I don't know, but I think I can find out for you. I promised you some middle and high school grade data. One area where we can see the impact of our lack of intervention in academics and needing continued focus on Tier 1 instruction is in our middle and high school grades, but there's some good news as well. So our average weighted GPA at the high school level is a 3.298, which is a positive indicator of student achievement. Now, if we were to strip away the weighting, meaning our AP classes are weighted at a higher rate, that would be a bit lower. This year, we have 1,735 individual students taking one or more AP classes, which could be either year-long or a semester-long course. To put this in perspective, we currently have 3,906 students enrolled in high school, meaning that about 44% of our high school students are currently enrolled or took an AP course this year. We offer 23 AP courses. Additionally, we also have 252 students that are taking our post-secondary enrollment options, and some of these students are also enrolled in AP courses. So there is some overlap there, and this shows a strong interest in advanced coursework. Of course, there are challenges. On the flip side, to the right, you can see that we are also experiencing an increase in the number of students failing in grades 9 through 12. It is important to note that for grades 6 through 8, these grades are still rolling. So when you see the green, they have year-long grades, so those grades are not final, and those could definitely shift. The numbers that you see in navy blue, those are semester 1 grades. They are final and transcripted.
Paul?
Yeah, Nicole, what percentage on the failing graph, what percentage of the percentage are repeat offenders?
Oh, that would be another hand calculation we would have to pull.
Okay.
So repeat offender.
So
I think it's on the next slide.
Is it on the next slide?
Yeah, number of students failing more than one.
Well, what I'm trying to,
You're asking something different.
but is it the same pupil that's failing, failing? Or is it, I failed in 9th grade, but I never failed again? That's what I'm trying to ascertain.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, but taking our data out of it,
Right.
there is research that indicates the probability, once you fail one high school level course, it increases a student's chances of failing another high school course substantially. So there is probably quite a bit of recidivism there. We're also going to look at our graduation rates in a little bit. So you'll see some.
But is it possible to get that number, Nicole? The percentage? Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Is anybody failing an AP class on that list there?
We did not pull it that way. I'm sure some of those might be AP courses, but I could not tell you with specificity how many. So now, this doesn't quite get to your point, Director Carbone, but is kind of adjacent to it. You can see the most commonly failed courses across our middle and high schools, and as you can tell, the majority of these courses are math related. This is a critical point to highlight because math continues to be one of our most challenging areas. We've already talked about the work that's being done around the math standards, going through standards-based review, and the work that's being done around Tier 1. So as you can see on the left, that is the number of middle school students that are failing courses as of January 31st, 2025. Again, those are not final grades. That is very much subject to change, but it does give you a snapshot. On the right, you can see the high school classes, the most commonly failed classes, and you can see the number of students that failed multiple classes. And that's over just one semester. So those are final. So, and as you can see on the bottom, those courses, those are all graduation requirements. So that is going to impact progress towards graduation. Yes.
Amber.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm going to take it from you. A question, and this might not be for the kids who are failing ultimately, but something I've noticed at the elementary level is that for kids who are testing very high in math, as far as I understand it, we don't have math gifted programming. It's language arts based. I think that's a huge area we could think about, like for kids who are really have a high aptitude for math, how can we support them? And even for if you don't fit the gifted threshold, how are we kind of encouraging the love of math and doing differentiation in the classroom? I don't know if that, I think teachers try their best, right? But we're trying to get some kids to even be at grade level. And so there's only so much differentiating that's possible. And so, yeah, it's a concern of mine.
Well, here's Director Georgia to talk about that.
Thank you for that question. One of the reasons why we as a district with teacher leaders chose Bridges Mathematics is that not only is it a quality, robust Tier 1 instruction, it also provides intervention for students who are not making benchmarks, and it also provides something that's called Concept Quest for those students who are meeting it for advanced learning. One of the things that we have done this year is our gifted education specialists. They have been participating in PD with Bridges alongside our 4-5 teachers, and we are investigating adding a math or a STEM portion to our Discover program. Right now it is a humanities-based program. One of the pieces that we've tasked our GESs, and they are doing some fantastic work looking at how do we onboard that moving forward for next year. And we're looking at putting that in place and using some of the pieces that we have within our Bridges resources with the Concept Quest. So thank you for that question.
Carly, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if, do we know how this relates to the absenteeism?
Yeah, and that was a question I think that was asked earlier. And that is data that we would like to also evaluate. As we were putting this together, we realized that we would need to tally or basically crosswalk how does this all connect. So we can get that. It might take us a little bit, but we can get that. And I apologize for doing this. I made this adjustment and it did not take, but I do want to show you how this relates to graduation rate data. So I'm going to go way back here. There it is. So one place that you see an example of how the academic data that you just saw and how it's showing up for our students, and an example of our local achievement gap is in our graduation data. It is important to note that this graduation data is lagging. We are always a year behind in graduation data because the state refines and tallies. So we never get the previous year's graduation data until the spring. So that's why you're seeing 2023 and 2022 data. So although Lakeville area schools generally performs higher than the state average across various demographic backgrounds, smaller, more diverse populations are not achieving at the same level as their peers. You may notice some improvements in some groups and declines in others from 22 to 23. This fluctuation is partly due to the cohort size of each group. For example, the graduation rate for Black students in 2022 was 95%, but in 2023 it dropped to 76.7%. In 2023, there were 43 seniors across all 3 sites. 33 graduated, 7 continued on, and 3 dropped out. Versus in 2022, there were 41 seniors, so only 2 less, but 40 of those graduated and 1 continued on with none dropping out. So those since the cohorts are relatively small, even minor changes can have a pretty dramatic impact on the percentages. And this is why you'll see graduation rates fluctuating for those smaller groups from year to year. Nevertheless, this is an area of significant concern and focus for us as well.
What is CTSTR?
That means the sample size was too small to be able to make a determination. So it's usually if it's less than 20 students.
Okay.
It's, can you hear me? It's cell too small to report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as we approach the end, I just want to take a moment because we've looked at a lot of really big data. We've looked at some small data. As Dr. McDonald started our presentation tonight, I want to bring it back around to humanizing the data. And I love this quote. Unfortunately, I don't know who said this. Data should be the servant of human progress, not the master. When we treat data as human beings, we can use it to foster engagement, guide decisions, and improve outcomes for our students. And that is the process that we've been engaging in for at least my time here and for time before that. So next, you are going to see 2 classrooms in our district. These are real classrooms that we pulled. I'm not telling you what classrooms or what school. I actually don't even know. I didn't want to know. But we wanted to be able to show you, we've looked at all of these numbers, but how does it really show up for a teacher on a Tuesday afternoon? How does it show up for those kids? What is their reality like? You got a little taste of that tonight. But it's important to know that all of this is a classroom is an incredibly complex web in which our teachers are trying to meet a lot of needs. And don't always have the support that they need to do that. So this is a pie chart and a couple of graphs. So you can see this is a 2nd grade classroom in our district. You can see our demographic representation on the left. You can see the percent of students that are on benchmark in reading, math, and SABRS. SABRS is a tool that we use to identify social, emotional, and behavioral skills or academic predispositions. And then you can see the percent of students at proficiency or at risk of meeting proficiency or not reading proficiency in reading and math. And then at the bottom, you'll see that this is a classroom with 24 students. 1 of those students has an IEP. 6 of them are English language learners. 5 of them have health plans. That means things like allergies or things that the teacher needs to make sure that they are attending to. 2 are participating in enrichment activities. 9 of them are currently in reading intervention, and 4 are participating in behavior intervention. There have been 43 minor behaviors throughout the year this year. I should point out that those intervention numbers will probably be increasing because this was pulled just before winter data was finalized. And so to put that in a graphic representation, this is 24 students in a second grade classroom. You'll also notice that we included that 2 of these, if we apply our percentages, are chronically absent. 12 are reading below benchmark, 8 are below math, 9 are in reading intervention. And there's a whole host of needs, and this teacher is working really hard to build relationships, develop rapport, and to bring all of their skills and expertise. And to Director Baker's point, they are the linchpin in making this happen for all of these students. And it is an incredibly complex, challenging job, and really speaks to the need for recruiting and retaining highly qualified teachers with growth mindset. And now we're going to just take a quick peek at what it looks like at 8th grade. So you're going to see a little bit of a difference here. It's going to be a much bigger class of 36. The demographics are slightly different. Now we have 2 students on IEPs, 2 students on a 504, just 1 EL student, 8 health plans, 8 students participating in enrichment, 5 major behaviors, and 5 minor behaviors that came out of this classroom. And this one teacher is managing 36 students for an hour a day and does this 5 times. And these are all of the different relationships and skills that this teacher would need to be able to make sure that students are learning at high levels. And so they need to have very diverse skill sets to be able to do that. And more importantly, we need to continue to build our systems so that when they have implemented everything that is in their toolbox and they have done all of that, we have a next step for them.
Just to point out, there's 14 below reading benchmark and 11 below math benchmark, and there's no interventions in place to support those students. So,
correct.
How long has that been the case, where we've had no intervention services available in middle school?
As long as I know.
We had it one.
What? Oh, you know something? Okay.
We had it 1 year. They had some floating FTE that they used. So always.
Okay.
And then this is the first year that secondary have had counselors in decades, right? Or a long time.
I've been here 10 years. This is the first time we've had counselors at the high school level. We do not have them at the middle school level. And we are well below the, I believe it's ASCA, is that correct? Yep. It's supposed, they recommend 250 to 1, and I believe we're close to 700 to 1.
So when you think about this on a secondary level, and all of that teacher has to maintain every day, multiple times a day, I guess you can see why our enrollment in teacher education programs continues to decline. And the thing is, like, if you look at this is not just a Minnesota problem, this is a nationwide problem. And the sooner that we look at this and realize that it's a crisis, the better off we're going to be, because we need to start focusing on that.
Kim, when you say your enrollment in teacher education, what are you referring to, like at colleges around the state?
Yeah. Just when someone graduates high school and they decide what their major is, we're seeing a decline of, like I said, average-wise, 45% nationwide. Some states are seeing 80% and above. Special ed is anywhere from 60 to 80%. Just to age myself a little bit here, when I graduated in 2001 and I took my first teaching assignment, before I graduated, they said, okay, when you're going to graduate, you're going to have at least 300 people competing against you. You need to make yourself stand out. And so in Iowa, they were telling us about, add-on endorsements, do these things to make yourself stand out. And the first job I applied for was an elementary first grade position, and there were 350 applicants. Now when I apply for a job, granted I'm applying for special ed, I might be the only applicant.
Sure.
Which when you're thinking about, we really need high-quality people in our classrooms, what's your option there then, right? And so it's not just like thinking about retaining and recruiting, but it's also, what are we doing at our secondary level to encourage students to go into education? What are we doing with the people that we already have within our system, kind of like Grow Your Own, the para-apprenticeship program, where you're trying to, help people go into the education system. And like I said, there is some something to say about what's the reason that we're not going into education. And a lot of people say, like I said, when I was in college myself, there was a big push on that this is a very respected profession. Like, we're going to be professionals. We're held to a different standard than everybody else. And now, like, I think there was just a shift during COVID, and a lot of teachers don't feel that that encouragement from society.
There are ed programs at the university level that are being sunsetted.
Yep.
Across the nation, because they don't have any enrollment at the universities for it.
Mm-hmm.
Do we as a district have relationships with certain universities and colleges around the state where that kind of feed into our district?
We do have student teachers. Do we have a formal partnership with anybody? No. Okay. My former district did. I couldn't.
So there are some universities that have reached out to us, or vice versa, and we sort of make a pledge and commitment that we will help support their students when they get to there's usually an observation stage and then a student teaching stage. And so it's a loose collaboration. We're not the only one in that pool. And so, we do try to accommodate as many student teachers as we can. As you know, that's also, we're asking teachers on top of that to mentor and help another teacher. They happily do it, though, I will say. And then hopefully we can retain those teachers over time. So yes, a little bit, but you're right, the demand is high. And so the teachers really, when I went for my student teaching, they just placed me. I didn't have it. They just said that we'll find the right place for you. Now student teachers, they pretty much can go where they choose to go. So there's different reasons why people make choices there.
Do you find that it's a benefit to our teachers, or is it more work to have a student teacher in your classroom?
I will say, that's an interesting question. Thank you, Chair Swanson. So over the course of my teaching career, I had a handful of student teachers. What I will say is that to do it right, you're giving a whole nother part of yourself and your time and your energy on top of this. Now, people say, well, they do take over some of your classroom duties and whatever, so, you just must be sitting in the lounge all day. The reality is, no, you are essentially a one-on-one coach to that teacher to help and support them so that they can grow into, an effective and excellent educator, which is what we want. So it really is a significant contribution. There's a lot of night phone calls and after school meetings and those types of things to really help them get where they need to be. So,
right.
So looking at this list, this is a massive undertaking. One might even say, if you could decouple some of these things, it might be beneficial to the teachers. Maybe. If they weren't responsible for all of this. Now, you always have to prioritize. So with you being up here, I think it's perfect that I get to ask you this question.
Put me on the spot?
Yes. What are our priorities for teaching and learning for the rest of this year, looking ahead to next year? Like, what are your goals? What are you pushing down to the principals who are pushing down to the teachers? And like, what's the focus from your chair at this point in time?
Our core work is really around our MTSS framework. It's really around Tier 1, and it's really around getting the right systems in place. Because I'll tell you what, we have incredibly passionate teachers in our district. We have incredibly passionate directors and coordinators at the district level. Everybody is doing the absolute most they can, sometimes more than they should, to try to help the students, right? So what we have to figure out is, how can we get the right systems and supports in place so that our teachers can teach and they can do their job, and then there are things that if if there are things that students need beyond what the teacher can do or has expertise in, we need counselors, we need intervention time, we need a schedule. We have, over the time I've been here, we had a whole group, where's Elida? We had a whole group that looked at every possible schedule out there, like trying to figure out how can we do things differently, because it's about time. It's about expertise. It's like our counselors and our teachers, and it's about getting the right systems in place, because when you have 150 kids or sometimes 185 kids a day, you have one that's really struggling, you have to know what to do next to help that child, right? So I would say it's really about MTSS. It's about core instruction in the classroom and getting the systems when the core instruction is not effective because a student has different needs. What is the next step? So we do have some of those processes, as you saw, in place at the elementary. We need to replicate those at our secondary, and certainly at our middle school. It's come up a lot tonight. They are the group, as Elida said, they don't have any counselors. They really don't have any other supports. They don't have any interventions. At least we've made some steps. We've been able to make some steps at the high school. But I would say that's an area we're significantly behind in terms of serving our students well in those areas.
Do the student liaisons fill some of that role in the middle school level?
The student liaisons are really more about, they are building relationships with students and families alongside of helping them navigate through our system. I don't believe, and Nicole could speak to this, none of our liaisons are licensed teachers, so they don't have that teaching background. Their expertise really lies in supporting students and then working with collaboratively with our student support administrative teams, sometimes teachers, to help them sort of navigate supports and try to help them find supports as needed. So that's really their role. They're not intended to be teachers or interventionists.
Well, we're at the end. Unless you have any final questions, I do have some resources for you. I am actually going to reshare this slide deck with you. I'll ask Kim if she can do that, because I did make some adjustments to it. But there are some additional resources, and tomorrow morning you will get a video from one of our comms teams explaining to you how to log in so that you can look at all of our data dashboard information.
Yeah, Carly.
I was going to send emails, but I just want to publicly commend you guys on all the questions you have answered today and a wonderful presentation. And this has been a lot of time standing up there, and just really appreciate all the work you have put in today.
Well, thank you. We
Definitely.
appreciate your engagement.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great to just, hear about our students and get this information. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Our pleasure.
And just to the board, I'll say, just wait till the next one when we talk enrollment, because that's going to be a lot of fun too.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any board reports? Moving on. None? Great. How about superintendent's report?
Yeah, I'd just like to address, there's a lot of questions come my way about extreme cold weather and what the decision criteria is with that. So my report to the board and to the community is the standard is the National Weather Service. So if you're looking at your phone and you have, say, Yahoo, or you have Apple, or whatever you have, I'm using the National Weather Service, as are all the superintendents across the state of Minnesota. So that might help a little bit. When it's extreme cold weather, the distinction that we as superintendents collaborate on is whether we get a warning or an advisory. You will note that today we got a warning. The temperatures are extreme in the sense that I think skin exposure 10 minutes or less can create frostbite and other things like that. Now, I understand we're in Minnesota, and I came to Minnesota in 11th grade, and yeah, we had days like that, and we just went to school. I get all that. That was 1970. And in 2025, it's a little different. And the other thing, too, transportation is another major consideration, and you can understand that in snowy weather, it's kind of like obvious, right? I can tell you the diesel engines will gel, and I know that, again, we live in Minnesota. I don't know, I remember plugging in a car with an extension cord so that the core would stay warm, putting blankets on cars, and that's gasoline. Diesels were a little more difficult. I just happen to know that from professional experience. So there are issues that occur in extreme cold weather that also are limiting factors on a school system. But I never take that decision lightly, and I just want everybody to know there's a process we go through. Those are some of the key things that we collectively as superintendents discuss and try to come to the best decision that we can. And of course, I do keep the board chair informed along the way. So I just wanted to address that. Thank you.
I will let you know my children were very grateful. First, not having school today.
I was going to say the choice cards really played out well in my household. They had
Yeah.
I let them do that, and they had their fun, and those were great.
All right. Yeah, it's a little after 9. I will entertain a motion to adjourn at this point.
Motion to adjourn?
All right, motion by Director Carbone to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, and a second by Carly Anderson. Being a first and a second, I will call it for a vote on a motion to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. And it passes. We're adjourned.